There are men who rule empires, and then there are men who have forgotten how to feel anything at all. Adrian Blackthorne was the latter, though London society would never dare say it to his face. They feared him too much. But fear is a poor substitute for respect, and an even worse foundation for love. A lesson the Duke of Blackthorne was about to learn in the cruelest way possible. What happens when the woman you've ignored for 3 years finally stops asking for your attention and starts demanding her freedom? Stay with me, because what unfolds next will shatter everything you think you know about pride, power, and the devastating cost of emotional cowardice. The winter of 1847 arrived at Blackthorne Manor like an unwelcome creditor, cold and insistent. Adrian stood at the window of his study, brandy glass untouched in his hand, watching ice crystallize across the gardens. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. The ledgers before him detailed another successful quarter, shipping investments in the Orient, railway expansions across the Midlands, property acquisitions in Scotland. Everything he touched turned to gold. Everything except his marriage. The numbers blurred. Adrian rubbed his eyes, aware of how pathetic the gesture was. Men like him didn't succumb to exhaustion. They endured. They conquered. They built dynasties on the broken backs of lesser men and never apologized for it. But lately the manor felt different, quieter. Not the respectful quiet of servants performing their duties, but something else. An absence. He couldn't quite name it, which irritated him more than he cared to admit. The study door opened without a knock. Adrian's jaw tightened before he even turned around. Only one person in this entire estate would dare such presumption. Vivienne stood in the doorway, and for a moment Adrian forgot how to breathe. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense that London debutantes aspired to. No delicate porcelain features or practiced simpers. Vivienne had always been too sharp for that. Too intelligent. Her dark hair was swept back severely, emphasizing the elegant bones of her face. The gray dress she wore was expensive but understated, appropriate for a duchess who had long since stopped trying to impress anyone, especially not her husband. "We need to talk," she said. No preamble, no deference. Just those 4 words, delivered with the kind of finality that made something in Adrian's chest constrict. He set down his glass with deliberate care. "It's nearly midnight. I'm aware of the time. Then surely this can wait until morning." "No," Vivienne said simply. "It can't." She crossed the room and Adrian noticed she was carrying something. Papers. Legal documents by the look of them. His instincts, honed by years of business negotiations, immediately went on alert. Vivienne placed the documents on his desk, right on top of his carefully organized ledgers. The gesture was violating in a way that had nothing to do with actual disorder. "What is this?" Adrian asked, though some part of him already knew. Had known, perhaps, since the moment she walked in. "Divorce papers." The words landed like artillery fire. Adrian stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "Excuse me? You heard me." Vivienne's voice was steady, but he caught the slight tremor in her fingers before she clasped them together. "I want a divorce, Adrian. I've already consulted with solicitors. It can be done quietly, discreetly. We'll cite irreconcilable differences and I'll retire to the countryside. You'll maintain your reputation, your holdings, everything. I'm asking for very little in the settlement." Adrian's mind went blank, then flooded with 1,000 contradictory thoughts at once. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "This is absurd." "Is it?" Something flickered in Vivienne's eyes. Not anger, something worse, indifference. "We haven't had a real conversation in 6 months. We sleep in separate wings of the house. When we're forced to appear together in public, we can barely look at each other. Tell me, Adrian, what exactly about this marriage is worth preserving? We made vows." The laugh that escaped her was bitter and sharp. "Vows. Yes, I remember those. For better or worse. In sickness and health. I meant every word I said that day. Did you?" Adrian's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You're being hysterical." "I'm being realistic. There's a difference." Vivienne stepped back, and the distance between them suddenly felt like miles. "We were both forced into this marriage by our families. You needed a respectable wife to legitimize your business dealings. My father needed your money to save his estate from bankruptcy. We're even, Adrian. The transaction is complete. There's no reason to continue this charade." Transaction. The word tasted like poison. That's what you think this is? Isn't it? Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that their marriage meant something, that she meant something. But the words stuck in his throat, tangled up with 3 years of carefully maintained distance. 3 years of separate bedrooms and polite conversation and all the invisible walls he'd built to keep her, to keep everyone at arm's length. "You can't just walk away," he said finally. "Watch me." The coldness in her voice sent something close to panic through his system. Adrian had negotiated with cutthroat businessmen, faced down hostile takeover attempts, stared down the barrels of pistols in duels over commercial disputes. He'd never felt anything like the vertigo currently spinning through his skull. If this is about money, God, you really are that blind. Vivienne shook her head slowly. This has nothing to do with money. I don't want your fortune, Adrian. I just want to stop feeling like a ghost in my own life. The vulnerability in that admission hit him harder than any accusation could have. For just a moment, her careful composure cracked, and he saw the truth underneath. The loneliness. The years of being ignored, dismissed, treated like expensive furniture. He'd done that to her. All of it. Vivienne. He reached for her, an instinctive gesture he immediately regretted because she flinched. Actually flinched, like she expected him to strike her. Adrian dropped his hand as if burned. "I've never laid a hand on you." "No," she agreed quietly. "You've just acted like I don't exist. I'm not sure which is worse." The silence that followed was suffocating. Adrian looked down at the divorce papers, at her signature already in place at the bottom. All he had to do was sign. She'd made it easy for him, just like she'd made everything easy for him over the past 3 years, managing the household, hosting his business associates, playing the perfect Duchess while he ignored her completely. He picked up his pen. Vivienne's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if she'd been expecting more of a fight. That small sign of relief cut deeper than any knife. Adrian stared at the signature line. His hand didn't move. "Adrian?" Her voice was cautious now. "What are you doing?" "I'm thinking." "There's nothing to think about. Sign the papers." "No." The single word dropped between them like a stone into still water. Vivienne went very still. "What do you mean, no?" Adrian set down the pen with deliberate care and met her eyes. "I mean, I'm not signing." "You can't refuse. I have grounds for— I don't care what grounds you have." Something fierce and desperate was rising in his chest, overriding every carefully constructed defense mechanism he'd built over the years. "I'm not signing the papers, Vivienne. I'm not letting you go." She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. "You don't get to make that decision. I'm your husband. In name only. For 3 years you've treated me like an obligation, a burden, something to be endured. And now when I finally have the courage to leave, you want to play the injured party?" Her voice was rising, years of suppressed anger finally breaking through. "You don't love me, Adrian. You never have. So why the hell won't you just sign the damn papers?" The question hung in the air between them, demanding an answer Adrian didn't know how to give. Because the truth was too complicated, too raw. The truth was that he'd spent 3 years pushing her away because everyone he'd ever cared about had either died or abandoned him. His parents in a carriage accident when he was 12. His younger sister from fever 2 years later. His closest friend and business partner killed in a factory explosion. He'd learned early that loving people meant losing them. So he'd stopped caring, stopped feeling. Built an empire instead, surrounded himself with wealth and power, convinced himself that was enough. Until tonight, when the only person he'd allowed into his carefully constructed life, even at a distance, was threatening to leave forever. "Because you're my wife," he said, the words inadequate and pathetic, even to his own ears. Vivienne laughed, and the sound was broken glass. "I'm your wife the way a painting is yours, Adrian. Something you own but never look at. Something decorative but ultimately meaningless." "That's not true." "Then tell me one thing you know about me. One real thing. Not my dress size or my favorite color for the drawing room curtains. Something that matters." Adrian's mind raced. He knew she took her tea without sugar. He knew she wrote every morning at dawn. He knew she'd fired the head housekeeper last year for cruelty to the scullery maids. He knew she read voraciously, everything from philosophy to scandalous French novels. But he'd never told her he noticed any of those things. had never asked about the books she read or joined her on those morning rides, had never acknowledged her kindness to the servants, or the way she'd transformed Blackthorn Manor from a mausoleum into something that almost felt like a home. "I know you deserve better than this," he said finally. "Better than me." Something in Vivian's expression softened, just for a moment. Then her walls came back up, higher than before. "At least we agree on something." She turned toward the door. "I'll give you 3 days to reconsider. After that, I'm leaving with or without your signature. I have enough of my own money saved to disappear, Adrian. You can fight me in the courts if you want, but I promise you the scandal will destroy everything you've built. Is your pride really worth that?" She left before he could answer, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality. Adrian stood alone in his study, surrounded by the trappings of his success, the expensive furniture, the priceless artwork, the ledgers documenting his vast fortune. None of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered. He looked down at the divorce papers, at the empty space where his signature should go. 3 days. He had 3 days to figure out how to fix 3 years of damage. 3 days to convince his wife that he was capable of being the husband she deserved. 3 days to save the only thing that had ever truly mattered, even if he'd been too much of a coward to admit it. Adrian Blackthorn had built an empire through ruthless determination and strategic brilliance. But standing in his study at midnight, staring at divorce papers he refused to sign, he realized he had no idea how to fight for something as intangible and terrifying as love. He was going to have to learn. Fast. Morning arrived with brutal efficiency. Adrian had spent the entire night in his study, nursing the same glass of brandy, staring at those damn papers. He tried to work, tried to distract himself with correspondence and business matters, but everything felt meaningless now. At precisely 7 o'clock, he made a decision. He found Vivian in the breakfast room, reading a letter while picking at toast she clearly had no intention of eating. She didn't look up when he entered. "May I join you?" Adrian asked. "It's your house." "It's our house." Now she did look up, her eyes sharp with suspicion. "Since when?" "Fair question." Adrian pulled out the chair across from her, not at the head of the table where he usually sat, but close enough to actually see her face. The surprise that flickered across her features told him everything he needed to know about how far they'd drifted. "I haven't signed the papers," he said. "I noticed." "I'm not going to." Vivian set down her letter with exaggerated patience. "We've already had this conversation." "No, you made demands, and I reacted poorly. That's not a conversation." Adrian leaned forward. "I'm telling you now, clearly and directly, that I will not grant you a divorce. You can hate me for it. You can make my life hell. But you're not leaving. You can't keep me prisoner. I'm not trying to keep you prisoner. I'm trying to keep my wife." "Why?" The question was almost a shout. "For God's sake, Adrian, why now? What changed between last night and this morning?" "Everything," he wanted to say. "Nothing. I've been a fool, and I'm terrified, and I have no idea what I'm doing." Instead, he said, "Give me 1 month." Vivian blinked. "What?" "1 month. Let me prove that this marriage can be something more than what it's been. If after 30 days you still want to leave, I'll sign the papers. No lawyers, no scandal. You can have whatever settlement you want, and I won't fight you." "You're insane." "Probably." Adrian kept his eyes locked on hers. "But I'm also serious. 1 month, Vivian. What do you have to lose?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What do I have to lose? Adrian, I've spent 3 years losing myself bit by bit in this marriage. Every day I wake up and wonder who I am anymore. I used to be someone. I had opinions and dreams and—" She stopped abruptly, as if catching herself revealing too much. "You want a month to what exactly? Pretend to care? Play the devoted husband until you get bored again?" "I want a month to show you who I should have been from the beginning." "And if I refuse?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then I become your worst nightmare. I'll tie this up in legal proceedings for years. I'll make sure every door in London society closes to you. There's the man I married." Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Threats and intimidation. How romantic. He stood as well, rounding the table before his brain could catch up with his body. "That's not what I— Damn it, Vivian, I'm trying here." "Trying what? To manipulate me into staying? To bully me into submission?" She was breathing hard now, color high in her cheeks. It was the most alive he'd seen her look in years. You want to know the truth, Adrian? The real reason I'm leaving? It's not because you ignore me or because this marriage is cold. It's because staying with you is killing something inside me. Every day I watch you walk past me like I'm invisible. I lose a little more of myself. And I'm done. I'm done disappearing. The raw pain in her voice stopped him cold. Adrian had faced down enemies in boardrooms and duels, had weathered financial crises and personal tragedy, but nothing had prepared him for the look in his wife's eyes right now. I see you, he said quietly. Liar. I see you every morning when you ride through the East Gardens. I see you when you stay up late reading in the library because you think no one notices. I see the way you defend the staff when visiting aristocrats treat them like dirt. I see you, Vivian. I've always seen you. I've just been too much of a coward to do anything about it. She was shaking now, and he couldn't tell if it was from anger or something else. Why? Because everyone I've ever loved has left me. The admission was torn from somewhere deep and terrible. My parents, my sister, Thomas, everyone. And I swore I'd never let myself care about anyone that much again. It was easier to keep you at a distance. Safer. Safer for who? Vivian's voice broke. Because it sure as hell hasn't been safe for me. Adrian reached for her hand before he could think better of it. To his shock, she didn't pull away. Her fingers were trembling in his. You're right, he said. About all of it. I've been selfish and cruel and every other terrible thing you could possibly call me. But Vivian, please, 1 month. Let me try to be better. Let me try to be the husband you deserve. I don't trust you. I know. I don't even like you very much right now. I know that too. She looked down at their joined hands, and Adrian could practically see the war happening behind her eyes. Finally, she raised her gaze to his. 1 month, she said, but there are conditions. Hope flared in his chest, dangerous and desperate. Anything. No empty gestures, no flowers or jewelry, or any of the meaningless gifts men buy when they're trying to placate their wives. I want real effort, Adrian. I want honesty. And if at any point I feel like you're just going through the motions, the deal is off, and I leave immediately. Understood? Understood. And you have to talk to me. Actually talk. No more hiding in your study or burying yourself in work. If this is going to work, I need to know who you are. The real you. Not the Duke of Blackthorn. Not the business magnate. The man underneath all of that. Adrian swallowed hard. She was asking for something far more terrifying than any business negotiation or duel. She was asking him to be vulnerable. All right, he managed. Vivian studied him for a long moment, then slowly withdrew her hand from his. The loss of contact felt catastrophic. 1 month, she repeated. Starting now. Starting now, Adrian agreed. She moved toward the door, then paused. And Adrian? Don't make me regret this. I can't survive being disappointed by you again. Then she was gone, leaving him alone in the breakfast room with the weight of an impossible promise pressing down on his shoulders. Adrian looked at his reflection in the polished silver tea service. The man staring back at him looked older than his 32 years, harder, carved from ice and isolation. 1 month to thaw a heart that had been frozen for over a decade. 1 month to prove he was capable of being human again. 1 month to save the only thing that mattered. He had absolutely no idea where to start. What? The next morning, Adrian did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He waited outside Vivian's bedroom door at dawn. When she emerged in her riding habit, she nearly walked straight into him. The surprise on her face would have been comical under different circumstances. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Joining you." Adrian nodded toward the stables. "For your ride, if you'll have me." Vivian's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You hate riding." "I don't hate it. I'm just not particularly good at it." He attempted something that might have been a smile. It felt rusty on his face. "But you love it, so I'm going to learn to love it too." "That's not how it works." "Then teach me how it works." For a moment he thought she'd refuse, then something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but a slight thaw, a crack in the ice. "Fine," she said, "but if you complain even once, I'm leaving you behind." They walked to the stables in silence. The morning was cold and gray, frost crunching under their boots. Adrian couldn't remember the last time he'd been awake at this hour for any reason other than business. The stable master looked shocked to see him, but was too well trained to comment. Within minutes, they were mounted and heading toward the eastern trail that wound through the Blackthorn estate. Vivienne rode like she'd been born in the saddle, natural and graceful. Adrian, despite his claim of competence, was decidedly less elegant. His stallion seemed to sense his discomfort and kept trying to veer off the path. "You're too tense," Vivienne called back to him. "The horse can feel it." "I'm perfectly relaxed." "You're gripping the reins like they're going to escape. Loosen up." Adrian tried, failed, tried again. The stallion snorted with what sounded distinctly like mockery. To his surprise, Vivienne laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "What's funny?" he asked, trying not to sound defensive. "You are. The great Duke of Blackthorn, feared by every businessman in London, defeated by a horse." "I'm not defeated. I'm strategically reassessing my approach." She laughed again, and something in Adrian's chest loosened. When was the last time he'd heard her laugh? Had he ever? They rode in companionable silence for a while, the tension between them easing incrementally. The estate looked different at this hour, softer somehow. The frost-covered gardens glittered in the weak sunlight, and deer watched them pass from the tree line. "Why did you really come?" Vivienne asked eventually. "And don't give me some rehearsed answer. The truth." Adrian considered lying, considered deflecting, then remembered his promise. "Because I'm terrified," he admitted. "Because I have 1 month to prove I'm not a complete monster, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Because watching you ride every morning from my study window has been the only thing that made this house feel less like a tomb for the past 3 years, and the thought of never seeing it again is—" He stopped, the words caught in his throat. Vivienne had turned her horse to face him fully. Her expression was unreadable. "You watched me ride? Every morning. Sometimes I'd time my coffee just so I could see you pass by the window. Why didn't you ever join me?" "Because I'm an idiot," Adrian said bluntly. "Because I convinced myself that distance was safer than intimacy. Because I'm very good at building walls and very bad at tearing them down." Something flickered across Vivienne's face. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding. "My father used to say that walls are easy to build but hard to live inside," she said quietly. "I never understood what he meant until I married you." The words hit like a physical blow. "Vivienne—" "We should head back," she interrupted, turning her horse. "It's going to rain." Adrian looked up at the clear sky, confused, but she was already cantering away. He followed, aware that he'd crossed some invisible line, but unsure whether he'd moved forward or backward. By the time they reached the stables, dark clouds had indeed rolled in, and the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. Vivienne dismounted with practiced ease while Adrian struggled with his stirrups, earning another of those almost smiles from her. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, handing off his horse to a waiting groom. She tilted her head, studying him. "You really want to do this? Every morning?" "Every morning," he confirmed, "for the next month, and hopefully longer. We'll see." But there was something in her voice that sounded almost like hope. As they walked back to the manor through the increasing rain, Adrian made a decision. He was done hiding, done pretending he didn't care. Whatever it took, whatever he had to face about himself, he was going to fight for this. For her. For the marriage he'd been too broken to build the first time around. But first, he had to become someone worth fighting for. And judging by the way Vivienne still maintained careful distance between them as they walked, he had a very long way to go. The rain began to fall harder, and Adrian Blackthorn, Duke, magnate, master of his own empire, realized he was about to fight the most important battle of his life. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he could win. But what Adrian didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know yet, was that someone else had been watching Vivienne too. Someone who had their own plans for the Duchess of Blackthorn. And those plans didn't include her staying married to a man who'd just started learning how to love. The rain didn't stop. It hammered against the windows of Blackthorn Manor like accusations, each drop a reminder of everything Adrian had failed to do for 3 years. He stood in the hallway outside Vivienne's chambers, his hand raised to knock, then lowering it again like a coward. This was pathetic. He'd negotiated with railroad barons and shipping magnates, men who'd slit throats over percentages. He'd stared down the barrel of a pistol in a duel over mining rights and never flinched. but knocking on his own wife's door felt like stepping off a cliff. He knocked. The silence that followed stretched too long. Adrian was about to retreat when the door opened. Vivienne had changed from her riding habit into a simple day dress, her hair still damp from the rain. She looked tired, and Adrian realized with a sharp twist of guilt that he'd probably never noticed when she was tired before. Never asked. Never cared enough to look. "What kind of man does that make you?" the voice in his head whispered. "What kind of man ignores his wife until she's desperate enough to leave? The kind who's about to lose everything if he doesn't figure out how to be human again." "Did you need something?" Vivienne asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Dinner," Adrian said. The word came out too abrupt. "Have dinner with me tonight. Not in the formal dining room. Somewhere else. Somewhere we can actually talk." She leaned against the doorframe, studying him with those sharp eyes that had always seen too much. "You want to talk?" "Yes." "About what exactly?" "About us. About why I've been such a bastard. About—" He stopped, frustrated with himself. This wasn't how negotiations worked. You didn't show weakness, you didn't admit fault. Except this wasn't a negotiation. This was his marriage, and he was finally starting to understand the difference. "About everything I should have said 3 years ago," he finished. Vivienne's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. Both would be justified. "The library," she said, finally. 8 o'clock. "And Adrian, if this is some performance to buy time, don't bother. I can see through you." "I know you can," he said quietly. "That's what terrifies me." She closed the door without responding, and Adrian was left standing in the hallway, wondering if he'd just made progress or dug his grave deeper. The library was different at night. During the day, it was impressive but cold, another display of wealth and status. But now, with a fire crackling in the hearth and candles casting warm shadows across the leather-bound volumes, it almost felt intimate. Adrian had ordered a simple dinner, roasted chicken, vegetables, wine that wasn't ostentatiously expensive. He'd also dismissed the servants, which raised eyebrows throughout the household. The Duke of Blackthorn serving his own dinner was apparently scandalous enough to inspire gossip that would probably reach London by morning. Let them talk. He was done caring what society thought. Vivienne arrived exactly at 8, wearing a deep blue dress that made her eyes look almost black in the firelight. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene he'd arranged. "No servants," she observed. "I thought we could use the privacy." "Privacy for what? Another ultimatum?" Adrian winced. "I deserved that." "You deserve a lot worse than that." But she moved into the room, accepting the chair he pulled out for her. "Though I'll admit I didn't expect you to play butler. I'm full of surprises lately." "That remains to be seen." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Adrian had no appetite, but he forced himself to go through the motions. Across the table, Vivienne picked at her food with the same disinterest. "You said you wanted to talk," she said eventually. "So talk." Adrian set down his fork. The firelight reflected off his wine glass, casting red shadows across his hands. He thought about those hands signing business contracts worth fortunes, thought about how easily he wielded power in every other aspect of his life. None of that mattered here. "I was 12 when my parents died," he began. "Carriage accident on the road from Dover. They were bringing me back a present from France. Some toy I'd asked for. I don't even remember what it was anymore." Vivienne went still, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "My sister Catherine was 10. She was—" Adrian's throat tightened. "She was everything good in the world, kind and funny, and she had this laugh that could light up entire rooms. She died 2 years later from scarlet fever. I sat by her bed for 3 days watching her burn up from the inside out, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing. Adrian, I'm not telling you this for sympathy." His voice came out harsher than intended. He forced himself to soften it. "I'm telling you because you asked me a question this morning. You asked why I watched you ride, but never joined you. Why I kept my distance. This is why." He reached for his wine, drained half the glass. The alcohol burned going down, but did nothing to steady him. "After Catherine died, I swore I'd never care about anyone that deeply again. It was easier that way, safer. I built walls around everything that mattered and convinced myself it was strength, that it was control. He laughed, bitter and broken. But it wasn't strength. It was cowardice. Vivian set down her fork slowly. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know who you married, not the title or the fortune, the man underneath all of that. And the truth is, Vivian, I'm damaged. I'm broken in ways I don't know how to fix. But I'm trying to learn because the alternative, watching you walk away, is worse than any fear I've been carrying around. The silence that followed was suffocating. Adrian could hear the fire crackling, the rain still hammering against the windows, his own heartbeat too loud in his ears. You think I'm not broken too? Vivian's voice was quiet but sharp as broken glass. You think 3 years of being invisible hasn't damaged me? You think I wake up every morning and don't wonder what's wrong with me that my own husband can't stand to be in the same room? Nothing is wrong with you. The words came out fierce, almost violent. Christ, Vivian, everything wrong here is me. All of it. You're the only good thing about this entire goddamn manor, and I've been too much of a fool to see it. Pretty words, she said. But words are easy, Adrian. You want to know what's hard? Believing them. Trusting that this isn't just panic because I finally had the courage to leave. How do I know you won't go back to ignoring me the moment the divorce threat is gone? You don't? Adrian leaned forward, holding her gaze. I can't prove anything to you with words. I can only show you, every day for the next month, every morning ride, every dinner, every conversation. I can only try to be better than I've been. Vivian stood abruptly, moving to the window. The rain had finally slowed to a drizzle, leaving streaks on the glass like tears. Do you know what the worst part was? She asked, her back to him. It wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't even the humiliation of being ignored by my own husband. It was hope. Every time you looked at me, every time we were in the same room, some stupid part of me hoped you'd finally see me, finally care. And every time you didn't, it killed something inside me. Adrian moved to stand behind her, close enough to see her reflection in the window, but not touching. Not yet. I saw you, God help me. I saw you every day. I just didn't have the courage to do anything about it. Why now? She turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. What changed, Adrian? Why do you suddenly care when you didn't for 3 years? Because I'm selfish, he admitted. Because the thought of you leaving made me realize what I've been throwing away. Because I'm terrified and desperate and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I can't let you go without fighting for this. For us. There is no us. There never has been. Then let me build one. From the ground up. Let me prove I can be the husband you deserve instead of the coward I've been. Vivian studied his face like she was looking for lies, for cracks in the facade. Adrian let her look. Let her see everything, the fear and desperation and grinding need to make this right. 1 month, she said finally. But Adrian, if you hurt me again, if you make me hope and then crush it, I will never forgive you. Do you understand? Never. I understand. I don't think you do. She stepped closer, and Adrian could smell her perfume, something light and floral that he'd never let himself notice before. You're asking me to risk everything I have left. Every piece of myself I've managed to protect these past 3 years. You're asking me to be vulnerable again when being vulnerable with you nearly destroyed me. That's not a small thing. I know. Then prove it. Starting tomorrow, starting every day after, prove that you're capable of being more than the Ice King of Blackthorn Manor. Adrian reached for her hand, half expecting her to pull away. She didn't. Her fingers were cold in his, trembling slightly. I'll prove it, he said. Whatever it takes. The next morning, Adrian was waiting outside her door again at dawn, and the morning after that, and the one after that. They rode together every day, and slowly, painfully slowly, Vivian began to thaw. She still maintained her walls, still watched him with suspicion, but occasionally she'd laugh at something he said. Occasionally the conversations would extend beyond polite pleasantries into something real. Adrian learned things he should have known years ago. That Vivian had wanted to study medicine before her father's bankruptcy forced her into society's marriage market. That she'd grown up with 3 brothers who taught her to shoot and fence and swear like a sailor. That she secretly fed the stable cats even though the head groom complained they were getting fat and lazy. He learned that she took her tea with milk, but only in the mornings. That she had nightmares sometimes about drowning, that she could speak French and Italian fluently, but pretended not to when visiting aristocrats made crude comments in her presence. He learned his wife, and the more he learned, the more he realized what a monumental idiot he'd been. But London society noticed the change. Of course they did. The Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn suddenly riding together, dining together, appearing at social functions as an actual couple instead of two strangers bound by a contract. The gossip started immediately. Adrian was in his study reviewing shipping manifests when his cousin Marcus arrived unannounced. Marcus Blackthorn was everything Adrian wasn't: charming, sociable, beloved by society. He was also a calculating bastard who'd been angling for the dukedom since they were children. "Cousin," Marcus said, helping himself to Adrian's whiskey, "I hear you've been playing the devoted husband lately. How novel." Adrian didn't look up from his papers. "Was there a purpose to this visit, or are you just here to irritate me?" "Can a man visit his favorite relative?" Marcus sprawled in a chair, entirely too comfortable. "Though I'll admit, I'm curious about this sudden reformation. One might almost think you actually care about your little wife." The casual dismissiveness in his tone made Adrian's jaw tighten. "Vivienne is the Duchess of Blackthorn. You'll speak of her with respect or leave." Marcus's eyebrows rose. My. The Ice Duke has thawed. How touching, though I wonder how long it will last. "Is there a point to this?" "Just a friendly warning, cousin." Marcus swirled his whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "Society is watching. Your little domestic drama is the talk of every drawing room in London. Some are calling it romantic. Others think you've lost your mind. And a few are wondering what happens if the Duchess decides your reformation came too late." Adrian set down his pen carefully. Meaning that if she leaves you anyway, there will be consequences. A divorced duke is scandal enough. But a divorced duke whose wife very publicly rejected his attempts at reconciliation? Marcus smiled. "That could damage more than just your pride, cousin. Business associates don't like instability. Investors get nervous. Opportunities dry up." "Are you threatening me?" "Threatening. I'm stating facts. You've built an empire on ruthlessness and control. Showing weakness now, showing emotion, it makes people wonder what else you might be weak about. Makes them question whether the great Duke of Blackthorn is as infallible as his reputation suggests." Adrian stood slowly, and something in his movement made Marcus's smile falter. "Get out." "Adrian, get out." The words were quiet, but carved from ice and iron. "And Marcus, if I hear you've said one word against Vivienne, if I hear you've so much as looked at her wrong, I will destroy you. Not financially, not socially. I will systematically dismantle every aspect of your comfortable life until you're begging me for mercy. Are we clear?" Marcus stood, his casual demeanor cracking. "You've changed." "Yes," Adrian agreed, "I have. Now leave before I have you thrown out." After Marcus left, Adrian stood at the window, watching rain clouds gather over London. His cousin was right about one thing: society was watching. And if Adrian failed, if Vivienne left him anyway, the consequences would extend far beyond his personal life. But for the first time in his adult life, Adrian found he didn't give a damn about consequences. He'd built his entire existence on fear of loss, fear of vulnerability, fear of caring too much. And where had it gotten him? Alone in a manor that felt like a mausoleum, married to a woman who was planning her escape. No. He was done being afraid, done letting fear dictate his choices. Whatever it took, he was going to win back his wife, and God help anyone who got in his way. The second week brought new challenges. Vivienne agreed to attend a ball at the Worthington estate, their first major social appearance as a couple since the night she'd asked for divorce. Adrian hated balls, hated the forced pleasantries and political maneuvering disguised as polite conversation, but he went because Vivienne wanted to go, and he'd promised to try. The ballroom was everything he despised about high society: gilt and crystal and people who measured their worth in bloodlines and bank accounts. Adrian endured the empty conversations, the calculating glances, the whispers that followed them like smoke. Then Lord Pemberton approached Vivienne while Adrian was trapped in conversation with a railroad investor. Pemberton was old money and older attitudes, the kind of aristocrat who believed women existed for decoration and breeding. Adrian had always found him distasteful but tolerable in small doses, until he overheard what Pemberton said to Vivienne. "My dear Duchess, I must say you're looking radiant tonight. Quite a change from the sad little ghost we've grown accustomed to. Has the Duke finally remembered he has a wife? Vivian's smile was poisonous. How kind of you to notice, Lord Pemberton. Oh, I always notice beautiful women, though I confess I'm surprised you're still here. Rumor has it you were planning to leave our dear Duke. Can't say I'd blame you. Cold fish, that one. Married to his ledgers more than his wife. Pemberton leaned closer, and Adrian saw Vivian stiffen. If you ever find yourself in need of warmer company, I'm certain we could come to some arrangement. The investor was still talking, something about quarterly returns and expansion opportunities. Adrian stopped listening, stopped breathing. Every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to cross the ballroom and remove Pemberton's face from his skull. Control yourself, the rational part of his brain insisted. You're in public. There are rules. Fuck the rules. Adrian excused himself mid-sentence, leaving the investor gaping. He crossed the ballroom in long strides, aware that people were watching, aware that this was going to become gossip by morning, not caring at all. Vivian saw him coming. Her eyes widened slightly, and he caught something in her expression, not fear exactly, but anticipation, like she was curious what he'd do. So was he. Pemberton, Adriana said, his voice carrying more ice than a January morning. I believe you were just leaving. Pemberton turned, his florid face splitting into a condescending smile. Blackthorn, I was merely complimenting your lovely wife. No need to be territorial. I'm not being territorial, I'm being clear. You will apologize to the Duchess, and then you will leave this ball. If you ever speak to my wife again, if you so much as look in her direction, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you're ruined, socially, financially, completely. The smile faltered. You can't be serious. Do I look like I'm joking? Adrian stepped closer and Pemberton actually backed up. Apologize. Now. People were definitely watching now. The music had stopped. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Pemberton looked between Adrian and Vivian, calculation warring with pride on his face. Finally, he bowed stiffly. My apologies, Your Grace. I meant no offense. Vivian inclined her head coolly. Of course you didn't. Pemberton fled. The music resumed. Conversation started up again, though everyone was still watching them from the corners of their eyes. Adrian turned to Vivian, suddenly aware that he might have just made everything worse. I shouldn't have asked me to dance, she said. What? Everyone is watching. Either dance with me or this becomes a scandal. Your choice. Adrian offered his hand. Vivian took it, and they moved onto the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. They'd never danced together before. Not even at their own wedding, where duty had been fulfilled with mechanical precision and no romance whatsoever. Vivian fit against him perfectly, her hand in his other hand at the small of her back. She was trembling slightly, and Adrian couldn't tell if it was from anger or something else. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly as they turned. Yes, I did. Why? Because you're trying to prove something? Because he disrespected you. Because I'm done standing by while people treat you like you don't matter. Adrian met her eyes. Because you're my wife, and I should have been defending you like that for the past 3 years. Something in her expression shifted. The walls didn't come down, but they cracked. Just a little. You're going to regret that, she said. Pemberton has powerful friends. This will cost you. I don't care. You should. The only thing I care about is you. The words came out raw and honest, without calculation or strategy. Let them talk. Let Pemberton scheme. Let the whole damn city turn against me. It doesn't matter, Vivian. None of it matters if I lose you. Her breath caught. For a moment, they just moved together across the dance floor, the rest of the ballroom fading into background noise. I almost believe you, she whispered. Then I'm making progress. Or you're a very good liar. I'm not lying. I'm terrified and desperate and completely out of my depth, but I'm not lying. The music swelled. Adrian spun her, and for just a moment, Vivian smiled. Really smiled. Not the careful social mask she wore, but something genuine and bright. It was the most beautiful thing Adrian had ever seen. When the dance ended, they stood there for a heartbeat longer than necessary, hands still joined, close enough that he could feel her breath. Take me home, Vivian said. Adrian did. The carriage ride back to Blackthorn Manor was silent. Vivian sat across from him, staring out the window at the dark London streets, her expression unreadable. Adrian wanted to say something, but every word felt inadequate. He'd defended her honor. He'd danced with her. He'd shown all of London that he cared. But was it enough? Would it ever be enough to make up for 3 years of calculated distance? When they arrived at the manor, Vivian moved toward the stairs without a word. Adrian caught her hand. "Wait." She turned, and in the candlelight she looked impossibly young and impossibly tired all at once. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me this chance, for not giving up on me completely." "Don't thank me yet. The month isn't over." "I know, but Vivian, tonight meant something. Dancing with you, defending you, all of it. It meant something to me." She studied his face for a long moment. Then, to his shock, she reached up and touched his cheek. Just a brief touch, her fingers cool against his skin. "It meant something to me too," she admitted quietly. "That's what scares me." Before he could respond, she withdrew her hand and climbed the stairs, leaving Adrian standing alone in the foyer with his heart hammering against his ribs. Progress. Painful, terrifying, exhilarating progress. The scandal hit the next morning. Adrian found the gossip sheets scattered across his desk, delivered by his steward with apologetic reluctance. The headlines were brutal. Duke threatens lord over wife. Obsession or desperation? The Blackthorn marriage, love or fear? Has the Ice Duke finally cracked? Adrian read through them mechanically, cataloging the damage. Pemberton had wasted no time spreading his version of events, a version where Adrian appeared unhinged, jealous, potentially unstable. Some papers speculated about Vivian's influence. Was she manipulating him? Had she bewitched the previously unshakable Duke? Others questioned his business judgment. If Blackthorn couldn't control his emotions at a simple ball, how could investors trust him with their fortunes? It was character assassination disguised as society gossip, and it was effective. Adrian's steward cleared his throat. "Several business associates have sent inquiries, Your Grace. They're concerned about—" "Tell them I'll address their concerns individually. Schedule meetings." "All of them?" "All of them." After the steward left, Adrian sat alone with the gossip sheets, feeling the walls closing in. This was Marcus's warning manifesting. This was what happened when you showed weakness in a world built on power and control. The study door opened. Vivian entered, holding her own copy of the scandal sheets. "I'm sorry," Adrian said immediately. "I knew there would be consequences, but I didn't think—" "Stop apologizing." Vivian dropped the papers on his desk. "Do you regret it?" "What?" "Last night. Defending me. Threatening Pemberton. Making a scene in front of half of London. Do you regret it?" Adrian stood, moving around the desk until he was close enough to see the fire in her eyes. "No, I'd do it again. I'd do it 100 times. Even though it's damaging your reputation? Your business relationships?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because you're worth more than all of it. The reputation, the business, all of it. I've spent 3 years choosing those things over you, and I won't make that mistake again." Vivian's expression softened, just slightly. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most foolish." "Probably both." She almost smiled. "What are you going to do about this?" She gestured to the papers. "What I should have done 3 years ago. Stand by you, publicly, completely. Let society think what they want." "That's not how your world works. The business world. Men like you don't survive on sentiment." "Then maybe I need to change my world." Vivian shook her head slowly. "You're going to lose everything. Not if I have you." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Adrian watched emotions flicker across Vivian's face. Doubt, hope, fear, something that might have been longing. Then she did something unexpected. She kissed him. It wasn't passionate or dramatic. It was brief, almost tentative, her lips barely brushing against his. But it was real. The first time his wife had kissed him in 3 years, and it felt like salvation and destruction all at once. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "Don't make me regret that." "I won't," Adrian promised, though his heart was trying to beat its way out of his chest. "Vivian, I need to think." She stepped away, putting distance between them again. "This is happening too fast. I need time to process." "Take all the time you need." She left without another word, and Adrian sank back into his chair, touching his lips where hers had been. Everything was falling apart. His reputation, his business relationships, the carefully constructed empire he'd built over decades. But for the first time in his life, Adrian felt like he was building something that actually mattered. If he could just hold on to it, if he could just prove he was worthy, if Vivian didn't change her mind and leave him anyway. The next 2 weeks were warfare disguised as society functions. Pemberton struck back through social channels. Invitations withdrawn, business connections severed, whisper campaigns that painted Adrian as unstable and Vivian as a manipulative seductress. Marcus circled like a shark, making sympathetic noises while clearly calculating how to capitalize on Adrian's fall from grace. And through it all, Adrian fought. Not with threats or violence, but with something he'd never truly wielded before: honesty. He faced every investor who questioned his judgment. He attended every social function where Vivian might be slighted, standing beside her like a wall against the cruelty of aristocratic society. He let the gossip sheets print their poison while he focused on the only thing that mattered: winning back his wife. But Vivian remained careful, cautious. She allowed his presence, accepted his courtship, even kissed him twice more. Brief touches that left Adrian desperate for more. But she kept her walls up, kept watching him like she was waiting for him to revert to the cold, distant man she'd married. 3 days before the month deadline, everything changed. Adrian returned to the manor after a particularly brutal meeting with railroad investors to find Vivian in his study. She was sitting at his desk, reading through his private correspondence. "What are you doing?" he asked. She looked up, and her expression was ice. "These are letters from Marcus, offers to buy you out, suggestions that you step down from various board positions, all dated within the past 2 weeks. Adrian's stomach sank. "Vivian, he's been actively working to destroy you, using the scandal, using the gossip, leveraging your defense of me as evidence that you're compromised, and you knew." Her voice shook. "You knew, and you did it anyway." "Yes. Why?" "Because you're my wife. Because I love you." The confession came out quiet but absolute. "Because I'd rather lose everything else than lose you." Vivian stood slowly. "You love me." "Yes." "Since when?" "Since the moment you walked into my study with divorce papers, and I realized I'd been an idiot for 3 years, maybe longer, maybe from the beginning, and I was too much of a coward to admit it." She walked around the desk, and Adrian couldn't read her expression, couldn't tell if he'd just won or lost everything. "You're going to lose your fortune," she said. "I don't care." "You're going to lose your position in society." "I don't care." "Your cousin is going to take everything you've built." "Let him. I'll build something else, something better. With you, if you'll have me." Vivian stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see tears gathering in her eyes. "You're an idiot." "I know. You should have told me this 3 years ago." "I know that too. And if I leave anyway? If I decide your love came too late and I can't forgive you?" The question hit like a blade between his ribs, but Adrian forced himself to answer honestly. "Then I'll sign the papers. I'll let you go. But Vivian, I'm begging you, please don't ask me to. Please give me a chance to be the husband you deserve." She reached up, touching his face like she had that night after the ball. But this time, her hand lingered. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "So am I. What if you hurt me again?" "I won't. I swear on everything I have left, I won't." "That's not a promise you can make. People always hurt each other." "Then we'll hurt each other, and heal, and fight, and forgive, and build something real, instead of the cold, empty marriage I forced on us. But Vivian, please, please don't give up on this. On us." The tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. Adrian reached up, brushing them away with his thumbs, cradling her face like she was something precious and breakable. "The month is almost over," Vivian said. "I know. I should ask you to sign the papers. I should protect myself. I know. But I don't want to." Hope exploded in Adrian's chest, violent and terrifying. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're an idiot and a coward, and you wasted 3 years of our lives." She smiled through her tears. "But I'm saying yes. One more chance, a real one. No more walls, no more distance. If we're doing this, we're doing it honestly." Adrian pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. "I love you. God, Vivian, I love you so much it terrifies me. Good, she said against his chest. You should be terrified. Because if you ever go back to being that cold bastard who ignored me, I will destroy you myself. Fair enough. They stood there in his study, holding each other while London schemed outside and Marcus circled, and the empire Adrian had built crumbled around them. But none of it mattered, because for the first time in 3 years, Adrian felt like he was home. But what neither of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know as they held each other in that moment of fragile peace, was that Marcus had already set his final plan in motion. And this time, the threat wouldn't come from society gossip or business sabotage. This time, it would come from something far more dangerous. Something that would force Adrian to choose between the woman he loved and everything he'd sworn to protect. And the choice would destroy him either way. The morning after their reconciliation, Adrian woke to find Vivian still asleep beside him. 3 years of separate bedrooms, and now she was here, her dark hair spilled across his pillow, one hand curled against his chest like she was afraid he might disappear. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the vulnerability in her face when she'd said yes, the trust she was giving him despite every reason not to. It was terrifying. More terrifying than any business deal or duel or threat Marcus could conjure. Because this time, Adrian had something to lose that actually mattered. He slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake her. The manor was quiet at this hour, servants not yet stirring. Adrian dressed and made his way to his study, needing to assess the damage from the past weeks. Marcus's letters. The business partnerships dissolving. The social invitations withdrawn. The empire he'd built was crumbling, but for the first time in his life, Adrian found he didn't care. Let it burn. He'd build something else, something better. With Vivian beside him, he could weather anything. Or so he thought. The study door was already open. Adrian's instincts went on alert immediately. He always locked that door. Always. He pushed it wider and froze. Marcus sat at Adrian's desk, looking entirely too comfortable. But it wasn't his cousin's presence that stopped Adrian's heart. It was the woman standing beside him. Lady Charlotte Ashford, Vivian's younger sister. Charlotte was everything Vivian wasn't. Delicate blonde, conventionally beautiful in the way society prized. She'd married a minor baron 2 years ago and moved to the countryside. Adrian had barely seen her since the wedding. So what the hell was she doing in his study at dawn, looking at him with something that might have been pity? Adrian's voice came out cold as January frost. Marcus. Charlotte. Explain. Marcus smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. Good morning, cousin. I was hoping we could have a conversation. A civilized one, before things get unpleasant. Get out of my house. It's not your house much longer, I'm afraid. Marcus gestured to the papers spread across the desk. I've acquired controlling interests in most of your shipping ventures. The Railroad Consortium voted you out last night. Your property holdings in Scotland are being seized for unpaid debts. Debts I may have strategically called in. In short, Adrian, you're ruined. The words should have hit like artillery fire. Instead, Adrian felt nothing but cold calculation settling over him. I don't care about the money. No, you care about her, your precious Vivian. Marcus's smile widened. Which brings us to why Lady Charlotte is here. Tell him, darling. Charlotte's hands twisted together and she wouldn't meet Adrian's eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't want to be part of this, but Marcus said if I didn't help, he'd ruin my husband. Thomas doesn't have your resources. We'd lose everything. Help with what? Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. The marriage. Charlotte finally looked at him, and there were tears in her eyes. Adrian, your marriage to Vivian isn't legal. It never was. The floor tilted beneath Adrian's feet. What are you talking about? Marcus stood, moving around the desk with theatrical grace. Your wedding 3 years ago. Beautiful ceremony, wasn't it? Except the officiant wasn't actually ordained. He was an actor I paid very handsomely to play the role. Every document, every signature, every legal filing, all forgeries. Quite good ones, I must say. Cost me a fortune, but it was worth it. Adrian's mind went blank, then filled with white noise. You're lying. I'm not. And Charlotte here can confirm it because she knew. Didn't you, darling? You were there that day. You watched your sister marry a man in a ceremony that meant nothing. Charlotte was crying openly now. I didn't know until after. Marcus told me weeks later, said it was too late to fix without scandal. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd destroy our family completely. I've been carrying this for 3 years, Adrian. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Marcus had been planning this from the beginning, from before the beginning. He'd sabotaged the marriage itself, creating a weapon he could deploy whenever Adrian became too powerful, too successful, too dangerous. And now, with Adrian's empire crumbling and his reputation in tatters, Marcus was pulling the trigger. Why? Adrian asked, though he already knew the answer. Because everything you have should have been mine. Marcus's facade of civility cracked, showing the rage underneath. The title, the fortune, the respect. I was supposed to inherit when your father died, but no, there was a spare. A broken little boy who grew up cold and ruthless and took everything that should have been mine. So I've been patient. I've been strategic. And now, cousin, I'm taking it all back. The marriage can be made legal. You can try. But think about the timeline, Adrian. Think about how this looks. Marcus's voice turned poisonous. You've been living in sin with a woman for 3 years, claiming her as your wife when you had no legal right. Society will tear you both apart. And Vivian, poor innocent Vivian, the woman who's been publicly humiliated by your coldness for years, only to discover she was never actually married at all? That her entire identity as the Duchess of Blackthorn was a lie? Adrian's hands curled into fists. I'll tell her the truth. I'll explain. You'll destroy her. Charlotte spoke up, her voice breaking. Adrian, I know my sister. This will devastate her. She's barely survived the past 3 years. Finding out it was all meaningless, that she was never your wife, that everything she endured was based on a lie, it will break her completely. Then I'll fix it. We'll remarry. Properly this time. Marcus laughed, cold and cruel. With what? You're bankrupt, cousin. Your reputation is in ruins. What do you have to offer her? What reason would she have to tie herself to a man who can't even protect her from scandal? The truth of it hit like a blade between the ribs. Adrian had nothing left. No fortune, no power, no position. Just the ruins of an empire and a love that had come too late. What do you want? He asked finally. Simple. Sign over the Blackthorn title. Deed me the manor and all remaining properties. Walk away quietly. I'll make sure the marriage scandal stays buried, for Vivian's sake, not yours. She'll be able to disappear into the countryside, avoid the worst of it. You can slink off to the continent, rebuild some semblance of a life. Everyone wins. Everyone except me. Well, yes, but you've been losing for weeks now, Adrian. You just didn't realize it. Adrian's mind raced, calculating angles, searching for leverage. But Marcus had planned too well. Every avenue of escape was blocked, every asset compromised. The only thing Adrian had left was the truth, and the truth would destroy Vivian, unless he lied, unless he became the villain she'd always half believed him to be. I need time to think, Adrian said. You have until tonight, midnight. After that, I take the information to the papers, and we let society destroy you both. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Adrian? If you tell Vivian about any of this, if you try to warn her or explain, I'll make sure every detail of your illegal marriage becomes public knowledge. The humiliation, the scandal, the legal ramifications, all of it will land on her shoulders. So think carefully about what you say. Think carefully about whether your love is worth her complete destruction. Marcus left, Charlotte trailing behind him with her head bowed in shame. The study door clicked shut, and Adrian was alone with the wreckage of everything he'd tried to build. He sank into his chair, the same chair where Vivian had confronted him with divorce papers that now meant nothing because they'd never been married at all. 3 years of coldness based on a lie. 3 weeks of fighting to win her back, only to discover he'd never actually had the legal right to call her his wife. And now he had a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Tell Vivian the truth and watch it destroy her. Or lie. Push her away. Become the monster she'd almost escaped. Save her from the scandal by making her hate him. Adrian's hands shook as he poured himself a drink. The whiskey tasted like ashes. There were men who faced impossible choices with courage. Men who found third options, clever solutions, ways to win against impossible odds. Adrian had always been that man. The strategist, the tactician, The Duke who never lost because he never allowed himself to be vulnerable enough to lose anything that mattered. But this time, every choice led to destruction, his or hers. And if he had to choose, if he had to sacrifice one of them to save the other, there was no question which it would be. He'd spent 3 years hurting Vivian through neglect. What was one more hurt if it saved her from complete ruin? The study door opened. Vivian entered, still in her nightgown with a robe thrown over it, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked soft and happy and trusting in a way that made Adrian want to put his fist through the wall. "There you are," she said, smiling. "I woke up and you were gone. I thought maybe—" She stopped, seeing his face. "Adrian, what's wrong?" "Everything. Nothing. The end of the world. We need to talk," he said, his voice coming out flat and emotionless. It was the same voice he'd used during their 3 years of cold distance. The same voice that had driven her to ask for divorce in the first place. Vivian's smile faltered. "What happened?" "I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Adrian stood, putting the desk between them like a barrier, like a wall, like all the defenses he'd spent weeks tearing down, now rebuilding in desperate haste. "This, us, all of it. I made a mistake thinking I could be the husband you deserve." The color drained from Vivian's face. "What are you talking about?" "The past few weeks. The courtship, the declarations, the promises. I was trying to convince myself I could change, that I could be someone different. But I can't." The lies tasted like poison, but Adrian forced them out anyway. "I'm not built for this, Vivian. I'm not built for love and vulnerability and all the things you need from me." "You're lying." But her voice shook with doubt. "I'm being honest. Finally." Adrian moved to the window, unable to look at her face. "I don't love you. I thought I did. I wanted to. But what I feel isn't love. It's possession. Ownership. The same thing I feel about my business ventures and properties. You're an asset I didn't want to lose. Nothing more." "Stop it." Vivian's voice broke. "Stop lying to me." "I'm not lying. The past weeks were an experiment, a test to see if I could feel something real. And I failed. You were right 3 years ago, and you were right a month ago when you asked for divorce. We don't belong together." "I don't believe you." Adrian forced himself to turn, to meet her eyes, to let her see nothing but cold indifference on his face. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Harder than watching his sister die. Harder than building an empire from nothing. Harder than anything. "Believe what you want. But the truth is simple. I don't want you, Vivian. Not as a wife. Not as a partner. I want my life back, my freedom, my focus on things that actually matter. Things that matter more than me." "Yes." The single word hung between them like an executioner's blade. Vivian stood frozen, and Adrian watched emotions flicker across her face. Shock, pain, betrayal, dawning understanding. "The divorce papers," she said finally. "Do you still have them?" "In the top drawer." She crossed to the desk, moving like she was underwater. Her hand shook as she pulled out the documents she'd presented him a month ago. The signature line where Adrian had refused to sign. "Sign them," she said. "Vivian, sign them." Her voice was ice now, all the warmth from this morning frozen solid. "You want your freedom? Fine. Take it. Sign the damn papers and let me go." This was what Adrian wanted, what he needed to save her from the scandal Marcus would unleash. So why did it feel like his heart was being carved out of his chest with a dull blade? He took the pen, signed his name in steady strokes that betrayed none of the agony screaming through every nerve, the signature that would end a marriage that had never been legal in the first place. Vivian took the papers, her face a mask of forced composure. "I'll leave today. Take the settlement, the amount we agreed on. I don't want your money. Take it anyway. You'll need it to—" "I don't want anything from you, Adrian. Not your money, not your name, not your empty promises or your cold heart, or any of it." Her voice was shaking now, control slipping. "I was a fool to believe you could change. I was a fool to think you were capable of love." Each word was a knife, and Adrian let them cut because he deserved everyone. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No, you're not. You're relieved. This is what you wanted all along, to push me away, to be alone with your ledgers and your empire and your frozen heart." Vivian moved toward the door, then stopped. I hope it's worth it, Adrian. I hope being alone is everything you dreamed it would be. She left, and the door closing behind her sounded like finality, like death. Adrian stood in his study, divorce papers signed, the woman he loved walking away believing he'd never cared at all. Outside, London was waking up. Soon Marcus would spread the word that the Blackthorn marriage was over. The scandal would be contained. Vivian would be spared the worst of it. And Adrian would be exactly what he'd always been, alone. Successful at the cost of everything that mattered. He poured another drink with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. This was survival. This was sacrifice. This was what love looked like when you had no good choices left. This was hell. The next 3 days were mechanical. Adrian signed papers, transferred assets, watched his empire systematically dismantled by Marcus's efficient cruelty. The Blackthorn title would remain his. Marcus couldn't take that, not legally, but everything else was gone. The manor, the businesses, the fortune, all of it flowing into Marcus's hands like water finding its level. Adrian didn't fight, didn't resist, just signed and signed and signed until his name meant nothing. Vivian had left that same day, taking only what she could carry. No servants, no fanfare, no dramatic farewell. She simply disappeared like she'd never been there at all. The staff whispered, London gossiped. Marcus smiled, and Adrian existed in a fog of numbness that felt disturbingly familiar. This was how he'd survived his parents' deaths, his sister's fever, Thomas's explosion. Shut down. Feel nothing. Become ice, except this time the ice wouldn't hold. Cracks kept forming, every time he passed Vivian's empty chambers. Every morning at dawn when he automatically looked toward the stables where she used to ride. Every evening when he poured 2 glasses of wine before remembering she was gone. On the 4th day, Charlotte came to see him. Adrian almost refused the visit, but curiosity won out over pride, and he found himself in the drawing room facing Vivian's sister. Charlotte looked terrible, eyes red from crying, hands twisting in her lap, guilt written across every feature. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I'm so sorry, Adrian. I should have told you years ago. I should have found the courage to—" "It doesn't matter now." "It does matter. You and Vivian could have been happy. If I'd just been brave enough to speak up, if I'd—" "Why are you here, Charlotte?" She looked up, and something fierce entered her expression. "Because I can't let this stand. Marcus threatened my husband. Yes, but Thomas and I have been talking, and we've decided to risk it. We're going to go public with the truth about the ceremony. We're going to expose what Marcus did." Adrian's heart lurched. No. Yes, it's the right thing. No. He stood, moving to the window so she couldn't see his face. If you expose Marcus, the scandal will destroy Vivian. Society will tear her apart. Everything she's been through, everything she's suffered, it will all be for nothing. But you love her. Don't you want a chance to— "I want her safe. I want her protected from the cruelty of a world that will judge her for something that wasn't her fault." Adrian's voice was steel. "You'll keep quiet, Charlotte. You and Thomas both. You'll let this die. Marcus is destroying you. Let him. I've survived worse." "Have you?" Charlotte stood, crossing to stand beside him. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who's already dead. You finally found something worth living for, and you're throwing it away." "I'm protecting her. You're protecting yourself. From the risk, from the vulnerability, from the possibility that love might actually be worth fighting for." Her voice softened. "Vivian thinks you don't care. She thinks the past month was a lie. But I see you, Adrian. I see what this is costing you. Why won't you fight?" "Because fighting means exposing her to scandal that would destroy her reputation forever. Fighting means making her choose between loving me and protecting herself. I won't do that to her. So you're choosing for her, just like you did for 3 years when you kept her at a distance." Charlotte shook her head. "You haven't changed at all. You're still the same man who's too afraid to let anyone close." The words hit harder than they should have because they were true. Even now, even after everything, Adrian was still choosing fear over faith, still choosing control over chaos, still choosing to protect himself by pushing away the one person who'd managed to crack his defenses. "Tell me something," Charlotte said quietly. If you could go back to that first day, knowing everything you know now, would you still marry her, even knowing it would end like this? Adrian didn't hesitate. Yes. Then maybe you owe her the same choice. Maybe she deserves to know the truth and decide for herself whether loving you is worth the risk. The truth will destroy her. The lie already has. Charlotte left him with that, and Adrian stood alone in the drawing room watching dusk settle over London. She was right. Of course she was right. He'd spent a month learning to be vulnerable, learning to open up, learning to fight for what mattered. And at the first real test, he'd reverted to type, pushed Vivian away to protect her, made her choice for her, became the cold, controlling man she'd tried to escape. Because he was terrified. Because letting her in completely meant risking the kind of devastation he'd sworn never to face again. Because love was the most dangerous gamble he'd ever taken, and he'd lost his nerve at the crucial moment. Adrian looked down at his hands. These hands had signed away his fortune, had built an empire and watched it crumble, had pushed away the only woman he'd ever loved. What the hell were they good for now? Marcus came to collect the final papers at midnight. He looked triumphant, carrying documents that would transfer the last of Adrian's assets into Blackthorn Holdings, now controlled entirely by Marcus himself. "It's done," Marcus said, spreading the papers across Adrian's desk. "Sign these, and you're free. Free to disappear, free to start over somewhere far from London. I'll even be generous. I'll give you enough money to live comfortably. Not lavishly, but comfortably. All I need is your signature." Adrian looked at the papers, looked at his cousin's smug face, looked at the ruins of everything he'd built. And something inside him snapped. Not the cold, calculated snap of a business decision. Something hotter, fiercer. The kind of rage that came from a man who'd finally realized he'd been fighting the wrong battle all along. "No," Adrian said quietly. Marcus blinked. "What?" "I said no." Adrian stood, and there was something in his movement that made Marcus take an involuntary step back. "You've taken my fortune, my businesses, my reputation. But you made one critical mistake, cousin." "And what's that?" "You assumed I cared more about money than I do about her." Adrian's voice was soft, deadly. "You assumed I'd let you win to avoid scandal. But here's the thing, Marcus. I don't give a damn about scandal anymore. I don't care what society thinks. I don't care what the papers print. I care about one thing, and you've given me nothing left to lose. If you fight me, I'll expose everything. The fake marriage, the years of deception. Do it." Adrian moved around the desk, and Marcus actually backed toward the door. "Expose it all. Let society tear us apart. Because I'm done hiding. I'm done protecting my reputation while sacrificing the woman I love. You want a war? Fine. Let's have one. But this time, I'm fighting for something that actually matters. You'll lose everything. I've already lost everything, you idiot. The money's gone. The empire's gone. My wife thinks I'm a monster who never loved her. What exactly do you think you can threaten me with now?" Marcus's facade cracked, showing panic underneath. "The scandal will destroy her. The scandal will hurt her. But lies destroy her slowly. I've been watching it happen for 3 years. I'll take honest pain over comfortable deception any day." Adrian grabbed his coat. "You've got your victory, Marcus. Enjoy it, because I'm about to make your life very, very complicated." "Where are you going?" "To tell the truth, to fight for my wife, to burn down every bridge and damn the consequences." Adrian stopped at the door. "You taught me something valuable tonight. You taught me that some things are worth losing everything for. So thank you, cousin, for showing me what really matters." He left Marcus standing in the study, probably already calculating damage control, already planning his next move. But Adrian didn't care. For the first time in days, in years, he felt something other than ice in his veins. He felt alive. The night was cold and dark, rain beginning to fall as Adrian called for his horse. No carriage, no driver. Just him and the road, and the desperate need to reach Vivian before it was too late. Charlotte had said she'd gone to their father's old estate in the countryside. 3 hours hard ride, maybe less if Adrian pushed. He pushed. The rain turned brutal, soaking through his coat, making the roads treacherous. Adrian didn't slow down. Couldn't. Every minute he wasted was another minute Vivian spent believing he didn't love her. Another minute she spent carrying the weight of rejection he'd laid on her shoulders to spare her from worse pain. Except Charlotte was right. The lie had destroyed her anyway. At least the truth gave her a choice. By the time Adrian reached the estate, it was nearly 3 in the morning. The house was dark, everyone asleep. He didn't care. He pounded on the door until a terrified butler answered, taking in Adrian's soaked appearance with wide eyes. "The Duchess," Adrian said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Where is she?" "Your Grace, it's the middle of the—" "I don't care what time it is. Where's my wife?" The butler's face went carefully blank. "I was under the impression you were no longer—" "That's what I'm here to fix. Now tell me where she is before I search every room in this house." Movement on the stairs. Adrian looked up to find Vivian standing there in her nightgown, candle in hand, looking like an avenging angel. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold enough to freeze blood. Adrian pushed past the butler, dripping water all over the marble floor. "I came to tell you the truth." "The truth? How novel. Is this another experiment? Another test to see if you're capable of human emotion?" "The truth is that I lied to you. 4 days ago, when I said I didn't love you, I lied." Vivian's expression didn't change. "Get out." "Not until you hear me out." "I don't want to hear anything you have to say. Our marriage isn't legal." The words came out in a rush, desperate and raw. "The ceremony 3 years ago was a fraud. Marcus paid the officiant to perform a fake wedding. We were never actually married, not legally." Vivian went very still. The candle in her hand trembled. "What?" "Marcus has been planning this for years. He wanted to ruin me, and he found the perfect weapon. The fake marriage gave him leverage. When I started fighting to win you back, when the scandals started hurting my business, he threatened to expose everything. He said if I didn't walk away quietly, he'd make sure you were destroyed by the revelation, that society would tear you apart for living in sin with a man who wasn't actually your husband. So you pushed me away. So I pushed you away. To protect you from scandal, to save you from humiliation, to—" Adrian stopped, forcing himself to be honest. "To protect myself from having to watch you suffer because of me. Again." The silence stretched too long. Vivian descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. When she reached the bottom, she slapped him. The crack echoed through the entrance hall. Adrian's head snapped to the side, and he tasted blood where his lips split. "You arrogant, self-righteous bastard," Vivian hissed. "You decided what I could handle. You decided what I deserved to know. You made my choices for me just like you've been doing for 3 years. I was trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need your honesty. I need you to trust me enough to let me make my own decisions about what risks I'm willing to take." Her voice broke. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through? Thinking you never cared? Thinking the past month was nothing but manipulation?" "I know, I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry, Vivian." Adrian reached for her, and miraculously, she didn't pull away. "I thought I was being noble, sacrificing my happiness for yours. But Charlotte was right. I was just being a coward, too afraid to risk your hatred when the truth came out, too afraid to give you the choice." "What choice?" "Whether loving me is worth the scandal that's coming. Because Marcus will expose everything now. The fake marriage, the years of deception. Society is going to crucify us both, and I can't stop it. All I can do is stand beside you and face it together. If you'll have me." Vivian's eyes searched his face, looking for lies. Adrian let her see everything, the fear and desperation and grinding need to make this right. "You signed the divorce papers," she said. "Papers that mean nothing since we were never legally married in the first place. You said you didn't love me. I lied. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you enough to give up my empire, my reputation, everything. But Vivian, I need you to understand. If you choose me, if you choose us, it's going to be brutal. Society will turn on you. The scandal will follow us for years. I have nothing left to offer you except myself and the promise that I'll fight for you every single day for the rest of our lives. You have nothing left. Not a damn thing. No fortune, no empire, no protection from scandal. None." Vivian tilted her head, and something flickered in her expression. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding. "So you rode 3 hours through a storm to tell me the truth, even though it might cost you the last thing you care about. Yes. And you're willing to face scandal, humiliation, and social ruin just to give me the choice you should have given me days ago. Yes. You're an idiot. I know. And a coward. I know that too. But you're here. I'm here. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something Adrian didn't expect. She started laughing, not happily, not with forgiveness, but with something that might have been relief. We were never married, she said. 3 years of hell, and we were never even legally bound. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. She looked up at him, and there were tears in her eyes. Adrian, do you understand what you've given me? What? A choice. A real one. Not whether to stay in a marriage I was trapped in, not whether to forgive a husband who treated me like furniture, but whether to start fresh, to build something new with a man who's finally being honest. She reached up, touching his face where she'd slapped him. The question is, do you trust me enough to let me choose? Really choose? Without manipulation or protection or noble sacrifices? Adrian covered her hand with his. I trust you. Then ask me, properly this time. He understood. This wasn't about the fake ceremony 3 years ago. This wasn't about the divorce papers or the scandal or anything else. This was about giving Vivian the power he should have given her from the beginning, the power to choose. Adrian sank to his knees in the entrance hall, still dripping water, looking up at the woman he loved. Vivian Ashford, will you marry me? Legally this time, honestly this time, knowing that I'm broke and ruined and about to be dragged through the scandal of the decade, knowing that all I can offer you is myself and the promise that I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Vivian looked down at him, this broken duke kneeling in a puddle on her father's floor, offering nothing but honesty and devotion, and she smiled. Ask me tomorrow, she said, after I've had time to think, after you've proven you can wait for my answer without trying to manipulate or control the outcome, after you've shown me you trust me enough to risk rejection. It was a test, a challenge, a way of forcing Adrian to sit with vulnerability and uncertainty without trying to manage the result. It was perfect. I'll wait, Adrian said, as long as you need. Good. Vivian stepped back, putting distance between them. Now get out of here before you catch your death. There's an inn 2 miles back. Go dry off. Come back tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk then. She turned and climbed the stairs, leaving Adrian kneeling in the entrance hall with his heart in his throat and hope burning in his chest for the first time in days. The butler cleared his throat awkwardly. Your Grace, shall I call for your horse? Adrian stood slowly, every muscle aching from the ride. Yes, thank you. As he rode back toward the inn through the dying rain, Adrian realized something crucial. For 3 years, he'd controlled everything, his emotions, his relationships, his entire life. And it had left him empty. Now he had nothing, no control, no certainty, no guarantee that Vivian would say yes tomorrow. But he had hope, and honesty, and a chance to build something real. Whatever her answer was, he'd respect it. He'd wait for it. He'd prove he could love her without trying to possess her. Because that's what real love looked like. Not ownership, not protection, but trust. And for a man who'd spent his entire life afraid to trust anyone, it was the most terrifying and exhilarating gamble he'd ever taken. Adrian spent the night at the inn staring at the ceiling, every muscle in his body screaming from the hard ride through the storm. Sleep was impossible. His mind kept replaying the moment Vivian had told him to wait, to prove he could sit with uncertainty without trying to control the outcome. It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever asked of him. By dawn, Adrian was pacing the small room like a caged animal. Every instinct screamed at him to ride back to the estate, to make his case, to convince her with logic and passion and whatever tools he had left. But that was the old Adrian, the man who manipulated outcomes and controlled variables and never left anything to chance. That man had lost everything that mattered. So Adrian waited, forced himself to sit with the possibility that Vivian might say no, that she might decide loving him wasn't worth the scandal and pain, that she might choose safety over the chaos he was offering, and if she did, he'd respect it. He'd walk away. He'd let her go because that's what love actually looked like. Not possession, but the freedom to choose. The hours crawled by with brutal slowness. Adrian tried to eat breakfast, failed. Tried to read the newspaper. Couldn't focus past the headlines about his own destruction. The scandal was already spreading through London like wildfire. The Duke of Blackthorn ruined. His empire dissolved. His marriage ended. Marcus had wasted no time claiming victory. At noon, a messenger arrived. Adrian's hands shook as he opened the sealed letter, recognizing Vivian's handwriting. The message was short. Come at 2. Alone. Be ready to fight for this. Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. Fight for this. Not a yes, not a no. A challenge. He could work with that. Adrian arrived at the estate exactly at 2, having spent the intervening hours making himself presentable. Clean clothes borrowed from the innkeeper, hair combed back, the split lip from Vivian's slap still visible but healing. He looked like a man who'd been through hell, which was accurate. The same butler answered the door, his expression carefully neutral. He led Adrian not to the drawing room but to the library, a massive space lined with books that had belonged to Vivian's father. Vivian stood by the window, backlit by afternoon sun. She'd changed into a simple dress, her hair pulled back severely. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Good. At least Adrian wasn't suffering alone. She turned as he entered, and her expression was unreadable. You came. You told me to. I also told you to be ready to fight. Vivian moved away from the window, and Adrian noticed she was holding papers. So let's see if you meant what you said last night. Let's see if you're really willing to risk everything. Adrian's throat went dry. What do you mean? Vivian set the papers on the desk between them. I spent the morning with my solicitor. These are contracts. Legal documents that will bind us together in ways that have nothing to do with marriage certificates or social expectations. I don't understand. The first document is a partnership agreement. If we do this, if we rebuild from nothing, we do it as equals, not as Duke and Duchess, not as husband and wife in the traditional sense, as partners. Every decision shared, every risk taken together. Your name carries weight even without your fortune. My family still has connections. Together, we might be able to salvage something, but only if you're willing to give up the control you've held onto for so long. Adrian looked at the document, saw clauses about shared authority, mutual consent, equal stake in any ventures they undertook. It was everything he'd never allowed himself to consider, true partnership instead of ownership. What's the second document? He asked. Insurance. A pre-agreement that if this falls apart, if you revert to being the cold bastard who controlled everything, I walk away with half of whatever we build. No negotiations, no fighting, clean break. Vivian's eyes were hard. I won't be trapped again, Adrian. I won't build a life with you only to watch you shut me out when things get difficult. The terms were harsh, unforgiving. They stripped away every protection Adrian might have tried to build into a traditional arrangement. They were perfect. Where do I sign? Adrian asked. Vivian blinked. You're not going to negotiate, try to soften the terms? Why would I? You're offering me exactly what I need, accountability. A guarantee that I can't fall back into old patterns without consequences. Adrian picked up the pen. I trust you, Vivian, more than I trust myself. If these terms keep me honest, then I'll sign them gladly. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Sign the partnership agreement first. Adrian did, his signature bold and clear. Then Vivian signed beneath his, and suddenly they were bound together by law and intent in a way that felt more real than any wedding ceremony ever had. The second document, Vivian said, sliding it forward. Adrian signed that too without reading the fine print. Whatever protection she needed, whatever safeguards made her feel secure, he'd give them to her. When both documents were signed and witnessed by the butler who'd been waiting in the corner, Vivian finally allowed herself to smile. Really smile, warm and genuine and heartbreaking in its beauty. You're still an idiot, she said. I know, and a coward. Working on that. But you're my idiot, my coward, my partner. She moved around the desk, and Adrian held his breath. So yes, Adrian Blackthorn, I'll marry you. Legally this time, honestly this time. And if you ever lie to protect me again, I'll destroy you myself. Adrian pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. I love you. God help me, I love you so much. I know you do. That's why I'm giving you another chance. Vivian pulled back just enough to look at his face. But Adrian, we need to talk about Marcus. The name was like cold water. Adrian's jaw tightened. What about him? He's not going to let this go. You humiliated him last night, refused to surrender. He's going to come after us with everything he has. Let him try. You don't understand. I sent word to Charlotte this morning. Marcus has already started spreading the story about the fake marriage. By now, half of London knows. The scandal is going to be catastrophic. Adrian had expected this, had known it was coming the moment he chose truth over comfortable lies. Then we face it together. It's not that simple. The legal ramifications alone, we were never married, which means we were living in sin for 3 years. The moral outrage, the social exclusion, the damage to both our families. Vivian's voice wavered. Adrian, this could destroy us before we even begin. Or it could be the foundation we build on. Honesty, partnership, facing consequences together instead of hiding from them. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. I'm not afraid of scandal anymore, Vivian. I'm only afraid of losing you. You almost did. You almost pushed me so far away I'd never come back. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. Starting now. Adrian stepped back, releasing her. We need to go to London, face Marcus directly. Control the narrative before he controls it for us. That's suicide. He has everything now, your fortune, your businesses, allies throughout society. What do we have? The truth, nice, and each other. Sometimes that's enough. Vivian studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we go to London. We fight. But Adrian, if we do this, we do it smart. No more noble sacrifices. No more lies to protect me. We face this as partners or not at all. Partners, Adrian agreed, in everything. Tip. They rode back to London together, side by side through the afternoon. No carriage, no servants, just 2 people on horseback, heading toward a battle they might not win. Adrian kept glancing at Vivian, still half convinced this was a dream, that she'd chosen him despite everything, that she was willing to fight alongside him instead of running for safety. There were moments in life when a man realized he'd been given something far better than he deserved. This was one of them. When the London skyline came into view, Vivian broke the silence. What's your plan? Confront Marcus, publicly, force him to admit what he did. He'll deny everything. You have no proof. I have Charlotte. If she testifies, he'll destroy her husband. You know he will. Adrian's hands tightened on the reins. Vivian was right. Marcus held all the cards. He'd planned this for years, covered his tracks, positioned himself perfectly to weather any exposure, unless Adrian changed the game entirely. Then we don't fight him on his terms, Adrian said slowly. We don't try to prove the marriage was fake or that he sabotaged us. We control what we can control, our own narrative. What do you mean? We get married, tonight. A real ceremony, properly done, with witnesses who can't be bought. We make it public, make it legal, make it impossible for Marcus to claim we were living in sin. Adrian turned to look at her. Then we hold a press conference, tell our story. The cold marriage, the divorce attempt, the reconciliation. We frame it as a love story that overcame obstacles. Let society decide whether to forgive or condemn. Vivian's eyes widened. That's insane, probably, but it's honest. And it takes away Marcus's biggest weapon, the scandal of an illegal marriage. If we're legally married now, the past becomes irrelevant. Except for the part where we were living together unmarried for 3 years, which we didn't know about. Marcus deceived us both. That makes us victims, not villains. Adrian could feel the strategy taking shape. The old tactical mind that had built an empire now focused entirely on saving the one thing that mattered. We can't beat Marcus with evidence or proof, but we can beat him with public opinion, with sympathy, with a story that's too compelling to ignore. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then she smiled, sharp and fierce. You're learning. Learning what? That sometimes the best strategy is honesty, that vulnerability can be a weapon. She urged her horse forward. All right, partner, let's go get married. Again, for the first time. Properly. They reached London as dusk was falling, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Adrian led Vivian straight to the one place he knew they'd find an honest officiant, a small chapel in Whitechapel, far from the aristocratic churches of Mayfair. The vicar was an old man who'd known Adrian's father, who remembered when the Blackthorn title meant something beyond wealth and power. He listened to their story with kind eyes and agreed to perform the ceremony immediately. No guests, no flowers, no elaborate preparation, just Adrian and Vivian standing before the altar in their travel-stained clothes, making vows that actually meant something this time. When Adrian slipped a simple gold band onto Vivian's finger, purchased from a jeweler near the chapel with the last of his ready cash, he felt something lock into place inside his chest. This was real, legal, binding in ways that had nothing to do with Marcus's manipulations. The vicar pronounced them husband and wife, and when Adrian kissed Vivian, it felt like both an ending and a beginning. They were married, finally, honestly, and now they had to survive what came next. The morning papers were brutal. Adrian woke in a modest hotel room, all he could afford now, with Vivian curled against him and the scandal sheets scattered across the floor where he'd thrown them in disgust. Duke's marriage, a fraud. 3 years of deception. Blackthorn. Duchess, unwed. Society reels from revelation. The fall of a dynasty. How pride destroyed an empire. Marcus had struck fast and hard, releasing the story with maximum damage. The papers painted Adrian as either a fool who'd been tricked or a libertine who'd knowingly lived in sin with an unwed woman. Vivian was portrayed as either a naive victim or a cunning seductress, depending on which scandal sheet you read. The truth, as always, was more complicated than either extreme. Adrian watched Vivian sleep, her face peaceful in the early morning light. They had hours before the press conference he'd arranged, hours before they faced London society and told their version of events, hours before everything either fell into place or shattered completely. Vivian stirred, her eyes opening. She saw his expression and didn't need to ask. How bad? Catastrophic. But we expected that. She sat up, reaching for the nearest paper. Read the headline, laughed without humor. Well, at least they spelled my name right. This doesn't scare you? Of course it scares me. I'm terrified. Vivian set down the paper, turning to face him fully. But I'm also angry. Marcus has taken enough from us. From you. I'm done letting him win. We might still lose. Then we lose together, as partners, as husband and wife. She kissed him, soft and fierce. Now get dressed. We have a war to fight. The press conference was scheduled for noon at a hotel ballroom Adrian had rented with money borrowed from Charlotte's husband. The risk Thomas was taking by supporting them was enormous, but he'd agreed anyway because Charlotte had finally found her courage. She would testify. Tell the truth about the fake ceremony. Expose Marcus's deception. It might cost them everything, but some battles were worth the price. Adrian stood backstage, straightening his borrowed coat, listening to the rumble of voices from the assembled reporters. Every major newspaper in London had sent someone. This was the scandal of the decade, and they were vultures circling carrion. Vivian appeared beside him, looking like a warrior queen in a simple blue dress. No jewelry except her wedding band, no artifice or performance, just raw, honest presence. Ready? She asked. No. You? Not even slightly. She took his hand. Let's do it anyway. They walked onto the stage together, and the room erupted in shouted questions. Adrian raised his hand, and the noise gradually subsided. Thank you for coming, he began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. I'm going to tell you a story. It's not a comfortable story. It's not a flattering story. But it's true. And after years of lies, the truth is all I have left to offer. He told them everything, the arranged marriage, the 3 years of coldness, Vivian's divorce request, his desperate attempts to win her back, Marcus's sabotage and the revelation that the marriage had never been legal. The reporters hung on every word, scribbling furiously. When Adrian finished, he stepped back and let Vivian speak. She told her side, the loneliness, the humiliation, the moment she'd finally found the courage to leave. The confusion when Adrian had fought for her, the devastation when she'd thought he'd given up, the choice to try again. By the time she finished, the ballroom was silent. Even the cynical reporters seemed moved. Then Charlotte stepped forward, and the room held its breath. She told them about Marcus's threats. about the fake ceremony she'd witnessed unknowingly, about the years of guilt and fear, about finally finding the courage to speak truth even though it might destroy her family. When she was done, a reporter stood. "Lady Charlotte, why should we believe you? You're the Duchess's sister. Of course you'd support her story." Before Charlotte could answer, another voice cut through the ballroom. "Because she's telling the truth." Everyone turned. A man stood at the back of the room, middle-aged, well-dressed, looking deeply uncomfortable. Adrian's blood ran cold. He recognized the man, the fake officiant from 3 years ago. "My name is Robert Gaines," the man said, moving forward. "I was paid by Marcus Blackthorne to impersonate a vicar and perform a false ceremony. I've kept quiet for 3 years because he threatened to ruin me. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not when I've watched what my deception has cost these people." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. Adrian stood frozen, hardly daring to believe it. Vivienne's hand tightened on his. "Did you know he was coming?" "No, I had no idea." Robert Gaines reached the stage, pulling out documents. "I have the original contract Marcus gave me. I have bank records showing his payments. I have everything you need to prove what he did." It was over. The evidence was incontrovertible. Marcus's carefully constructed plan was falling apart in real time. Adrian should have felt triumphant, should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt nothing but cold calculation settling over him. This wasn't over. Marcus wouldn't go down without a fight. And when cornered, desperate men did desperate things. As if summoned by the thought, the ballroom doors burst open. Marcus stood there, flanked by hired men Adrian recognized as enforcers, the kind of muscle used for intimidation and worse. His cousin's face was twisted with rage, all pretense of civility abandoned. "Enough!" Marcus snarled. "All of you, get out! This is family business." The reporters didn't move. Neither did Adrian. "You're finished, Marcus," Adrian said quietly. "The truth is out. Your scheme failed. Walk away while you still can." "Walk away? Walk away?" Marcus stalked forward, and his hired men followed. "You've taken everything from me, my birthright, my future, my chance at the life I deserved, and you think I'm just going to walk away? You did this to yourself. I did what I had to do. You had everything handed to you, the title, the fortune, the respect, while I got scraps, table scraps from a man too broken to appreciate what he had." Marcus's voice rose to a shout. "So I took it, slowly, carefully, and I'd do it again." "Then you're a fool." Vivienne stepped forward, and Adrian's heart stopped. Because Adrian without his fortune is still 10 times the man you'll ever be. You've spent your whole life blaming him for your failures. Maybe if you'd spent that energy building something of your own, you wouldn't be so pathetic. Marcus's hand moved to his coat. Adrian saw the flash of steel, understood what was happening a split second too late to stop it. The pistol came up, aimed directly at Vivienne. Time seemed to slow. Adrian saw the reporters scattering, saw Charlotte screaming, saw Gaines diving for cover, saw Vivienne standing perfectly still, staring down the barrel of a gun with terrifying calm. There were moments when a man discovered who he truly was, when all the walls and defenses stripped away, leaving only instinct and truth. This was Adrian's moment. He moved without thinking, putting himself between the pistol and Vivienne, heard her shout his name, heard the crack of the gun firing, felt the impact hit his shoulder like a hammer blow, spinning him around. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Adrian hit the ground hard, blood spreading across his chest. The pain was distant, abstract, less important than making sure Vivienne was safe. He looked up, saw her kneeling beside him, pressing her hands against the wound, saw Marcus being dragged away by hotel security, saw reporters rushing forward, documenting everything, saw Vivienne's face above his, terrified and furious and more beautiful than anything he'd ever seen. "You idiot," she was saying, tears streaming down her face. "You absolute idiot. Why did you do that?" Adrian tried to answer, found he couldn't quite catch his breath. The pain was starting to register now, white-hot and spreading. "Had to," he managed. Couldn't let you Stop talking, save your strength. Someone get a doctor." Vivienne's hands were shaking, blood seeping between her fingers. "Adrian, listen to me. You're going to be fine. You hear me? You're going to be fine because I refuse to lose you now, not after everything." Adrian wanted to tell her he loved her, wanted to tell her this was worth it, that taking that bullet was the easiest decision he'd ever made. Wanted to tell her she was worth dying for, though he'd much rather live for her instead. But the darkness was closing in, pulling him under. The last thing Adrian saw before consciousness fled was Vivian's face, and the last thing he heard was her voice, commanding him to stay, to fight, to survive. Because some stories weren't meant to end in tragedy. Some battles were meant to be won, and some love was worth bleeding for. The darkness took him, and Adrian fell into it knowing that whatever happened next, at least he'd finally become the man Vivian deserved. A man who'd learned that real strength wasn't control or power or wealth. It was the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to love without reservation, to take a bullet for the person who made life worth living. And as consciousness faded completely, Adrian's last coherent thought was simple and clear. Worth it. Pain was the first thing Adrian became aware of. Not the distant, abstract sensation from when the bullet hit, but sharp and immediate, radiating from his shoulder like fire, which meant he was alive. The realization came slowly, consciousness returning in fragments. White ceiling, antiseptic smell. The steady drip of water somewhere nearby. A hospital room, then. He'd survived. Adrian tried to move and immediately regretted it. The pain spiked, dragging a groan from his throat. Instantly, a hand closed around his. Warm, familiar, real. Vivian. Adrian forced his eyes fully open. She sat beside the bed, still wearing the blood-stained dress from the press conference. Her hair was a mess, face pale with exhaustion, eyes red from crying. She looked like she'd been through hell. She looked perfect. "You're awake," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank God you're awake. The doctor said you'd be fine, but you were unconscious for so long, and I thought, how long?" Adrian's voice came out as a rasp. 18 hours. The bullet missed the major arteries, but you lost a lot of blood. They had to operate." Vivian's grip on his hand tightened. "You absolute idiot! What were you thinking, jumping in front of a gun like that?" "Wasn't thinking, just reacting." Adrian managed a weak smile. "Couldn't let him hurt you. So you let him hurt you instead." Tears were streaming down her face now. "Do you have any idea what it was like watching you fall? Watching the blood pour out of you while I couldn't do anything? I've survived 3 years of loneliness, Adrian. I couldn't survive losing you. Not now. Not when we finally found each other." Adrian raised his free hand, the one that didn't feel like it was on fire, and brushed away her tears. "I'm sorry. But Vivian, if I had to make that choice again, I'd do the same thing. Every time. You're worth it. I'm not worth dying for. You're worth everything. That's what I finally understand, not the fortune or the empire or the title. You. Just you." She kissed his palm, her tears warm against his skin. "You're not allowed to be romantic right now. You're supposed to be recovering. I'll recover better if you're here. I'm not going anywhere." Vivian settled back into her chair, but she didn't let go of his hand. "You're stuck with me, Adrian Blackthorne. For better or worse. In sickness and health. For real this time." "Best thing that's ever happened to me," Adrian said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They sat in silence for a moment, just holding hands, breathing together. Then Adrian's mind started working again, processing beyond the immediate reality of survival. "Marcus," he said. "What happened to Marcus?" Vivian's expression hardened. "Arrested. He's being held for attempted murder. The evidence Gaines provided, combined with Charlotte's testimony and the very public shooting, means he's finished. The magistrate is talking about a long prison sentence, possibly transportation to the colonies." "Good. The scandal is everywhere. Every paper in London is running the story. But Adrian, the narrative has shifted. You're not the villain anymore. You're the Duke who took a bullet for his wife, the man who fought for love against impossible odds. Society is eating it up." Adrian almost laughed, then stopped because it hurt too much. Of course. The same society that had condemned him days ago was now celebrating him because he'd bled dramatically enough to make a good story. The fickleness of public opinion was almost amusing. Almost. "I don't care what society thinks," he said. "I stopped caring the moment I chose you over my reputation." "I know. That's why they love you now. People always romanticize the things they can't control." Vivian's smile was bitter. "But there's more." Your business associates, the ones who abandoned you when Marcus started his campaign, they're coming back, offering partnerships, investments, trying to rebuild bridges now that you're the tragic hero instead of the fallen duke. Tell them no. Vivian blinked. What? Tell them no. All of them. Adrian shifted in the bed, wincing at the pain but needing her to see his face, to understand he meant this. I don't want the Empire back. Not the way it was. I built that whole structure on fear and control and the belief that power was the only thing that mattered. It nearly destroyed us both. Adrian, you can't just walk away from everything. I'm not walking away. I'm choosing differently. He squeezed her hand. We signed partnership agreements, remember? Equal stakes, shared decisions. Let's build something new, something that actually matters. Not an empire, a life. Vivian studied his face, searching for doubt or hesitation. Adrian let her look. Let her see that he was serious, that the man who'd valued wealth and power above all else had died in that ballroom. The man who'd woken up was someone different. Someone who'd finally learned what was worth fighting for. All right, Vivian said slowly, we build something new, together. But Adrian, we still need income. We still need a way to survive. Then we'll find one. Start small. Use what skills we have. I know business, you know people. Between us, we'll figure it out. Adrian managed a real smile this time. Besides, I'm told tragic heroes make excellent investments. We'll leverage the sympathy while it lasts. That actually made her laugh, surprised and genuine. You're terrible. I'm practical. There's a difference. A knock at the door interrupted them. Charlotte entered, followed by her husband Thomas. They both looked exhausted but relieved. You're awake, Charlotte said, moving to the other side of the bed. We've been so worried. The doctors kept saying you'd be fine, but seeing you just lying there, bleeding... She stopped, composing herself. I'm sorry. This is my fault. If I'd spoken up years ago, if I'd found the courage sooner... Stop, Adrian said firmly. This is Marcus's fault, not yours. He's the one who made the choices that led here. You were as much a victim as we were. But I stayed silent because you were protecting your family. I understand that. I've made plenty of choices out of fear, Charlotte. I'm not going to judge you for yours. Adrian glanced at Thomas. Thank you for supporting us, for taking the risk when you didn't have to. Thomas nodded, his expression serious. Family takes care of family, even family that married into the mess. He smiled slightly. Besides, watching Marcus get dragged away by the authorities was worth the risk. What's going to happen to him? Adrian asked. Trial, Thomas said. With Gaines's testimony and the evidence he provided, plus the very public attempted murder, Marcus is looking at significant prison time. His assets are being frozen pending investigation. Everything he took from you might be recoverable. Adrian shook his head. I don't want it back. Let the courts distribute it to creditors, charitable causes, whatever. I'm done with that life. The three of them stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had, but for the first time in years, Adrian felt clear, focused, free from the weight of maintaining an empire built on fear and isolation. Are you sure? Vivian asked carefully. Adrian, that's a fortune. You're just going to give it away? I'm sure. Money didn't make me happy. Power didn't make me happy. The only time I felt anything close to happiness in the past decade was these last few weeks with you. Everything else is just noise. Vivian's eyes were bright with tears again, but she was smiling. You really have changed. I had to. The alternative was losing you, and that was unacceptable. Adrian looked at Charlotte and Thomas. I need a favor, both of you. Anything, Charlotte said immediately. Help us rebuild, not the empire, something smaller, more honest. Thomas, you have connections in trade that Marcus never touched. Charlotte, you know society in ways I never bothered to understand. Between the four of us, we could build something sustainable, something good. Thomas and Charlotte exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them. Then Thomas nodded. We're in, he said. On one condition. Name it. You stop trying to do everything alone. You lean on people. You ask for help when you need it. You trust that we're here because we want to be, not because we're obligated. Thomas's voice was firm. You've spent your whole life pushing people away, Adrian. That ends now. It was a fair demand. A necessary one. Adrian had built walls so high he'd nearly suffocated inside them. Tearing them down was terrifying, but it was also the only way forward. "Deal," Adrian said. "Partners. All of us." They stayed for another hour, discussing plans and possibilities, until the doctor arrived and insisted Adrian needed rest. Vivian shooed them out with promises to send word when he was stronger, then settled back into her chair beside the bed. "You should rest too," Adrian said. "You look exhausted." "I'll rest when I know you're really all right." "I'm all right. Better than all right. I'm with you." Vivian smiled, but there was something haunted in her eyes. Something she wasn't saying. Adrian knew that look. Had seen it in mirrors for years. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing. Everything's fine." Liar. "Talk to me, Vivian. Real partnership means honesty, remember?" She was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and vulnerable in a way he'd rarely heard. "I'm scared," she admitted. "This past month, everything changed so fast. You went from the cold stranger I married to the man who took a bullet for me. And I want to believe it's real, that the change is permanent, but part of me keeps waiting for you to revert, to shut down again, to push me away." The confession hit Adrian harder than the bullet had, because she was right to be scared. He'd spent 3 years training her to expect coldness and rejection. 1 month of effort didn't erase that damage. "Come here," he said, pulling her toward the bed with his good arm. Vivian hesitated, then carefully climbed up beside him, mindful of his injury. She fit against him perfectly, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes," Adrian said quietly. "I can't promise there won't be days when old habits try to surface, when fear tries to make me build walls again. But Vivian, I can promise I'll fight it. I can promise I'll be honest when I'm struggling instead of shutting you out. I can promise that every single day I'll choose you over comfort, over safety, over everything." "How do I know you mean it?" "Because I'm lying in a hospital bed with a bullet wound that proves I'd rather die than watch you get hurt. Because I signed away my empire without hesitation. Because I'm terrified right now, absolutely terrified of failing you again, and I'm telling you that instead of pretending everything's fine." Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I mean it, Vivian, all of it. You're stuck with me, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death do us part." She was crying again, quiet tears soaking into his hospital gown. "I love you. God help me. I love you so much it scares me. I love you too. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone." They lay together in the hospital bed, holding each other as the afternoon light faded to evening. Outside the window, London continued its relentless pace, carriages rattling past, vendors calling their wares, life moving forward whether you were ready or not. But in this room, time felt suspended. Two people who'd been strangers in their own marriage, learning how to be partners, learning how to trust, learning that strength wasn't about control or power, but about vulnerability and honesty, and the courage to keep trying even when failure was possible. Adrian had spent his whole life believing that caring about people made you weak, that love was a liability, that the only way to survive was to shut down your heart and focus on things you could control. He'd been wrong about all of it. Real strength was admitting when you were terrified. Real power was giving someone else the ability to hurt you and trusting they wouldn't. Real control was accepting that some things were beyond your control and choosing to embrace the chaos anyway. These were lessons Adrian had learned too late to save his parents or his sister or his friend Thomas, but maybe not too late to save himself. Maybe not too late to build something worth having with the woman in his arms. Adrian spent 5 more days in the hospital. Vivian rarely left his side, sleeping in the chair when the doctors insisted she couldn't share the bed, holding his hand through the pain of recovery, helping him relearn how to move his injured shoulder. The papers continued their coverage, the story evolving from scandal to romance. The Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn became London's favorite tragic heroes. The cold aristocrat who'd learned to love. The patient wife who'd never given up hope. It was mostly fiction, of course, but fiction based on enough truth that Adrian didn't bother correcting it. Marcus's trial was scheduled for the following month. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible. He'd spend years in prison, possibly the rest of his life. The empire he'd stolen was being systematically dismantled by courts and creditors. Adrian felt nothing about it. No triumph. No vindication. Just a distant awareness that justice was being served and a profound relief that the threat was neutralized. On the sixth day, the doctors cleared Adrian to leave. He dressed slowly, his shoulders still stiff and painful, Vivian helping him with the buttons he couldn't quite manage. "Where do you want to go?" she asked. "We can't go back to Blackthorn Manor. Marcus still technically owns it until the courts sort everything out. I don't want to go back there anyway. Too many ghosts." Adrian finished buttoning his coat, then turned to face her. "I was thinking we could find somewhere new, somewhere that's ours. Start fresh." "With what money?" "You gave away your fortune, remember? I have some savings Marcus didn't know about. Enough to rent a modest house, maybe start a small business. Nothing extravagant, but enough." Adrian took her hands. "Vivian, I know this isn't the life you signed up for. The manor, the title, the wealth. You're entitled to all of it. If you want to fight for it, fight to reclaim what Marcus took, I'll support you. But if you're asking what I want, it's simple. I want a small house, a quiet life. You beside me. Everything else is negotiable." Vivian looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, slow and genuine and so beautiful it made Adrian's chest ache. "A small house sounds perfect," she said, "as long as it has a library." "Deal, a small house with a library. And a garden. I've always wanted a garden. A small house with a library and a garden. And room for guests. Charlotte and Thomas will visit." Adrian pulled her close, careful of his shoulder, and kissed her properly for the first time since the shooting. "A small house with a library, a garden, and room for guests. Anything else?" "You," Vivian said simply. "Just you. Honest and present and mine." "I can do that. I will do that." They left the hospital together, stepping out into a London afternoon that felt different somehow. Clearer. The air was cold but clean, and the sky above was that particular shade of gray-blue that meant spring was finally coming after a brutal winter. Adrian hailed a cab and they rode through the city toward Charlotte's townhouse, where they'd been offered temporary lodging. The streets were crowded with people going about their lives, merchants and laborers and aristocrats, all existing in the same space but rarely intersecting. Adrian had spent his whole life in the aristocratic bubble, never really seeing the world beyond his own privilege. But now, stripped of his empire and riding in a hired cab with his shoulder throbbing, he saw London differently, saw the possibilities instead of just the power structures, saw the humanity instead of just the hierarchies. Maybe losing everything had given him something more valuable than wealth or status. Maybe it had given him perspective. The cab pulled up to Charlotte's townhouse, a modest but respectable address in a decent neighborhood. Thomas greeted them at the door, helping Adrian inside with careful concern for his injury. Charlotte was waiting in the sitting room, tea already laid out. She hugged Vivian, then hesitated before carefully embracing Adrian as well. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I got shot," Adrian said dryly. "But recovering." They settled in, drinking tea and discussing practical matters. Charlotte and Thomas had been making inquiries about properties to rent, business opportunities that wouldn't require significant capital, ways to rebuild without the Blackthorn fortune. It was strange talking about such mundane things after the drama of the past weeks. Strange, but good. Normal. Real. This was what life looked like when you stripped away the performance and pageantry of aristocratic society. Just people trying to build something sustainable, helping each other, making plans. Adrian found he liked it. The conversation eventually turned to Marcus's trial. Thomas had been following the proceedings, and the outlook was grim for Adrian's cousin. "The prosecution has enough evidence to put him away for decades," Thomas said. "The fake ceremony, the financial manipulation, the attempted murder, it's all documented. Gaines's testimony alone would be enough to convict." "Good," Vivian said coldly. "Let him rot." Adrian said nothing. Part of him agreed. Marcus deserved every consequence coming his way. But another part, the part that had spent too many years consumed by bitterness and isolation, felt something close to pity. Marcus had destroyed himself chasing power that was never his to claim, had poisoned his own life with resentment and entitlement, had ended up with nothing except a prison cell and the knowledge that his elaborate schemes had failed. It was a cautionary tale Adrian recognized because he'd been walking the same path before Vivian had forced him to change course. There but for the grace of circumstance went Adrian himself. "I want to visit him," Adrian said suddenly. Everyone stared at him. What? Vivian's voice was sharp. Why on earth would you want to see that man? Because he's family, because I need to look him in the eye and understand why he did this. Because, Adrian paused, searching for the right words. Because holding on to anger doesn't serve me anymore. I need to let it go. And I can't do that without confronting him one last time. He tried to kill you. I know, but he failed. And now he's going to prison, and I'm going to build a life worth living. I've already won, Vivian. This is just closure. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly. If that's what you need, but I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Partners, remember? We face things together, even the ugly things. Adrian took her hand, grateful beyond words. Together, then. Watch out. The prison was exactly as grim as Adrian expected. Stone walls and iron bars, and the stench of human misery concentrated in tight spaces. The guards led them through corridors that echoed with distant shouts and rattling chains. Marcus sat in a cell awaiting trial, looking nothing like the polished aristocrat who'd orchestrated Adrian's downfall. His clothes were plain, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow with the reality of what was coming. When he saw Adrian and Vivian approach, something flickered in his expression. Surprise. Then resignation. Come to gloat? Marcus asked, his voice flat. No, Adrian said. I came to understand. Understand what? How I destroyed you? I'd think that was obvious. Understand why you hated me so much. Why you spent years planning this instead of building your own life. Adrian moved closer to the bars, and Vivian stayed beside him, a solid presence at his shoulder. We were children when my parents died, Marcus. I was 12. You were 14. Whatever you think I took from you, I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. I would have given you the title gladly if it meant getting my family back. Marcus laughed, bitter and broken. You really don't understand, do you? It was never about the title alone. It was about everything. The respect, the opportunities, the way people looked at you like you mattered. While I was the spare's spare, the cousin no one remembered. The man who'd always be in your shadow. So you decided to tear me down instead of building yourself up. I tried building myself up. Do you know how many business ventures I started? How many investments I made trying to prove I was as capable as the great Duke of Blackthorn? They all failed. Because no one would take me seriously. No one would give me the same chances they gave you. Because you were chasing the wrong things, Adrian said quietly. You wanted my life instead of building your own. You wanted external validation instead of internal worth. And Marcus, I get it. I really do. Because I spent 3 years making the same mistake, chasing power and control instead of things that actually mattered. Don't you dare compare us. I'm not comparing. I'm saying I understand how easy it is to lose yourself chasing the wrong goals, to wake up one day and realize you've wasted years on things that don't matter. Adrian's voice was steady, without anger or judgment. But there's a difference between us, Marcus. When I realized what I was doing, I changed. You doubled down. You hurt people. You destroyed lives, and now you're here, and I'm out there, and the only person responsible for that is you. Marcus's hands clenched on the bars, his knuckles white. You think you've won, but you haven't. You're broke, ruined, starting over with nothing. I know, and I've never been happier. Adrian glanced at Vivian, saw her watching him with something that might have been pride. Because I finally understand what actually matters. Not the empire or the fortune or the reputation, just this. Love, partnership, building something real with someone who sees me for who I actually am. How touching. You'll forgive me if I don't applaud. I don't need your approval, Marcus. I don't need anything from you except one thing. Adrian met his cousin's eyes directly. I forgive you. The words hung in the stale prison air, impossible and unexpected. Marcus stared at him like Adrian had spoken a foreign language. What? I forgive you. For the fake marriage. For the sabotage. For everything. Not because you deserve forgiveness. You don't. But because holding on to anger was killing me slowly for years. I'm done with it. I'm letting it go. And with it, I'm letting go of you. Marcus's face went through a series of emotions, confusion, rage, something that might have been grief. I don't want your forgiveness. I'm not offering it for you. I'm offering it for me, for Vivian, for the life we're going to build without the weight of this hatred dragging us down. Adrian stepped back from the bars. Goodbye, Marcus. I hope prison gives you time to figure out who you might have been if you'd chosen differently. He turned and walked away, Vivian beside him. Behind them, Marcus shouted something, curses or pleas. Adrian couldn't tell and didn't care. The words washed over him like water, meaningless and distant. By the time they reached the prison entrance, Adrian felt lighter than he had in years, like he'd been carrying a weight he hadn't known was there, and suddenly it was gone. That was either the wisest thing you've ever done or the most foolish, Vivian said as they stepped out into the afternoon sun. Probably both, but it needed to be said. Did it help, the closure? Adrian considered. Yes. Not because Marcus deserved it, but because I deserved to stop letting him live rent-free in my head. He took enough from me. I won't give him my future, too. Vivian stopped, turning to face him fully. You're not the man I married 3 years ago. No, I'm not. Is that a problem? It's the opposite of a problem. She kissed him, soft and fierce. I like who you're becoming, Adrian Blackthorne. I like the man who forgives his enemies and builds gardens and chooses love over empire. Good, because he's here to stay. They walked together through London, two people who'd survived scandal and sabotage and attempted murder, heading toward a future that was uncertain, but theirs to build. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, beautiful and temporary and perfect. 3 months later, Adrian stood in the garden of their new home, a modest house in a respectable neighborhood, far from the grandeur of Blackthorne Manor, but infinitely more welcoming. The garden was Vivian's project. She spent hours out here, planting flowers and vegetables, getting her hands dirty in a way that would have scandalized London society. Adrian loved watching her work, loved the way she looked with dirt on her nose and satisfaction on her face. He was learning to garden himself. Badly, but with enthusiasm. The roses he'd planted last week were already looking questionable, but Vivian had assured him they'd recover if he stopped overwatering them. It was peaceful here. Quiet. The kind of life Adrian had never imagined wanting, but now couldn't imagine living without. The business they'd started with Charlotte and Thomas was growing slowly but steadily. Nothing like the empire Adrian had lost, but profitable enough to be sustainable. They imported specialty goods from the Orient, sold them through a network of shops Thomas had connections with, and split the profits equally. It was honest work, good work. Work that didn't require Adrian to crush competitors or manipulate markets or sacrifice his humanity for profit. He was learning to be content with enough instead of always chasing more. Vivian emerged from the house carrying lemonade and news. Letter from Charlotte. The trial ended. Marcus was sentenced to 20 years transportation to Australia. He'll likely never return. Adrian accepted the glass she offered, processing the information. 20 years. Effectively a life sentence for a man of Marcus's age and temperament. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt sad. Are you all right? Vivian asked, settling onto the garden bench beside him. I'm fine, just thinking about waste. Marcus had every opportunity to build a good life. He chose destruction instead. It's a tragedy, really. A tragedy he chose. You can feel sad about it without feeling guilty. I know, and I don't feel guilty. Just aware that it could have been me. If I'd kept choosing power over people, control over connection, I could have ended up just as alone and bitter. But you didn't. You chose differently. Vivian leaned against his good shoulder, the one without the bullet scar that still ached on cold days. You chose to change. That matters. They sat together in the garden, watching the sun set over their modest kingdom. This was what happiness looked like, Adrian realized. Not grand estates or vast fortunes or social prestige. Just this. A garden. A partner. Peace. The journey from the cold duke in his study to the man sitting in this garden had been brutal. Adrian had lost nearly everything. His empire, his fortune, his reputation. He'd been shot, betrayed, humiliated. But he'd also gained everything that mattered. Love, partnership, purpose beyond profit. A life worth living instead of an existence worth escaping. If someone had told the Adrian from 3 years ago that this was where he'd end up, broke but happy, scarred but healing, Building a life with the wife he'd once ignored, he wouldn't have believed it possible. That Adrian had been too broken to imagine healing, too afraid to imagine love, too convinced that power was the only thing worth having. This Adrian knew better, had learned through pain and loss and desperate choices that the things worth having were the things you couldn't buy or control. They had to be earned through honesty and vulnerability and the courage to keep trying even when failure was possible. "What are you thinking about?" Vivian asked, watching his face. "How lucky I am. How grateful. How terrified I still am that I'll mess this up somehow." "You probably will mess up sometimes. I probably will too. That's not the question." Vivian took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "The question is whether we'll face it together when it happens. Whether we'll be honest about our mistakes and work to fix them instead of hiding behind walls." "Partners," Adrian said. "Partners," Vivian agreed. "In everything." The sky was darkening now, stars beginning to emerge. Adrian pulled Vivian closer, mindful of his healing shoulder, and they sat together in comfortable silence. This wasn't the ending Adrian had expected when he'd refused to sign those divorce papers months ago. It was smaller, quieter, less dramatic than the empire he'd lost. But it was real. It was honest. It was built on a foundation that wouldn't crumble the first time life got difficult. And for a man who'd spent his whole life chasing things that didn't last, that permanence was worth more than any fortune. "I love you," Adrian said into the gathering darkness. "I know," Vivian replied. "I love you too, even when you overwater the roses." "Especially when I overwater the roses." She laughed, and the sound filled their small garden with warmth and light. Adrian closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of flowers and earth and home. This was what winning looked like. Not crushing your enemies or building empires or accumulating wealth. Just this. Finding someone worth fighting for and doing the work to become someone worth keeping. The cold Duke was dead. Long lived the man who'd learned to love. And in the quiet garden of their modest home, with Vivian in his arms and the future stretching before them uncertain, but theirs, Adrian Blackthorne finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. Not in fortune, not in power, but in the things that money couldn't buy and death couldn't take away. Love, partnership, home. It was enough. It was everything. It was finally, beautifully, terrifyingly real, and for the first time in his life, Adrian was grateful for exactly what he had instead of mourning what he'd lost. That, more than any empire or title, was the victory that mattered.